Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Tonight, I figured I would dive in. There was a request last time for actually making a video going through some of my .NET templates, and I've actually been spending some time the last couple weeks trying to update and improve some of the .NET templates and adding some more features to them. So I figured we would dive in and take a look at that. There's also a couple material design ones, but for anybody not paying attention to the Discord for it, Material Design 5.3.0 is released and out the door. So 5.3.1 will probably be on its heels. I usually expect that every release there's some number of bugs that just crop up from new things, people testing, that sort of thing. So I'm anticipating that. I was really happy to see that my pipeline almost worked this time. I was very close. It's the very last step that actually commits back version number update that ended up failing, but I just did it manually, called it a day, and it worked great. At least I think it worked great. Let's go check on that. But we'll check on that in just a minute. First, something exciting. Okay. This week, GitKraken released 11.5.0, and this one just made me very, very, very excited. Specifically, there's not a ton of stuff in here in terms of like new features. There's some access to different models. You can do some AI pickers. We'll look at that in a second. But this right here, right? This is what got me very, very, very excited. Is huge performance increases. I've been using this all week on some repos that are large and notoriously problematic for being a little laggy and slow, and there is a noticeable increase. If you weren't noticing speed performances before, you might not notice anything. Smaller repos, some of those, whatever, right? There's a handful of things that just feel a little smoother and faster, maybe not overly noticeable. For bigger repos, lots of branches, lots of tags, lots of commits, yeah, this is noticeably faster and better. Huge props to the team for this. Absolutely love it. A couple other ones that I will go through and show. And again, let me just move myself to the side. I'm just going to point out one little thing here is I am on an enterprise SKU. So if you don't see this on yours, it might be a SKU thing. Because I don't always check it where the breakpoints is. But on the AI integration, assuming you have a high enough SKU for it, you do have model selection. I've actually been jumping up to the Flash preview and getting a lot better results. And so I'm going to change all of my defaults off of here onto the 2.5 Flash because it's been working a lot better for me. Yes, I love a performance release. 100%, Kenny. 100%. Like everything just feels snappier to me, which has been absolutely amazing. Love every bit of it. There's also a handful of small bugs. With 11.4, there was an issue where if you were interacting with your Git repository outside of the commit graph, like even from within the terminal inside of GitKraken or some other outside tool, the amount of time it would take for the graph to update and refresh was like 30 to 60 seconds at times. It was dog slow. Now, snappy. It's still not like instantaneous, but I mean, you've got some outside process mucking with your Git repository. What do you expect? But much better, significantly nicer. Okay, with that, we're going to take a quick gander down my .NET templates, and we're going to look at some of these, and then we will go through and play with them. So for people who are unaware, .NET, we have a template engine called .NET New is oftentimes how it gets referred to, but it is .NET templates. There's a link here, and if anybody wants to play along at home, here's my repo. And I will say, and this is the docs for doing your own templates or installing them and that kind of thing, but we'll cover that. This bit here walks you through what it takes to install it. It assumes that you have the .NET SDK already installed, because if you're looking to use my templates, they're all .NET templates. You are not limited to .NET templates. It's just this is what it is designed for, but you can technically .NET New any file type. It's an arbitrary templating engine for you. It's just some of the extra functions are built around doing .NET-y things, so you get used to it. So .NET New will install the templates, and you'll be off to the races. If you decide you're done with them, there's your uninstall command. And then if you already have a version of mine, be aware I've been pushing updates, so expect to see some revs to these. There is a .NET New update. The way I have been trying to version these, and this is again one of those things where semantic versioning gets weird because what is considered a breaking change, right? And the way I've been doing it is if the CLI for the arguments that you pass to .NET New is a breaking change, then I'll rev my major version. If it's just a bug fix with no impact to the CLI, I patch version. If there is a backwards compatible CLI change, like I add more options or something, that's a minor version rev. So that's the way I've been trying to version it. I don't think that there is widespread support for what or how to version templates. It's kind of left up to you. The other thing to note is if you've already started a project, my templates are built to be solution level, full whole thing, right? There is technically a switch we'll look at where you could do just a project for some of them, but they really are designed to be full solution, and they are set up the way I like to start projects. So it's all about, this is the way I like to build them. So there is a lot of heavy opinion here, but take what you like. Right? In some cases, I've put in switches for people to turn things on and off because sometimes I don't want all my things, and sometimes I do. So again, heavy opinion, but if you're wondering how I like to build stuff, this is the example of how I like to build things. So I currently have a WPF one for if you're wanting to build a NuGet package, one if you're wanting to build a command line application, and then one for Avalonia. The Avalonia one we may spend a little time working on. There's a future Avalonia app in my future that is coming, which is kind of exciting. I won't spoil it yet because we haven't really started it, but it's coming and it's going to be cool. But there's like a long lag time for its due date. So, but I got permission to poke at it on stream. So once we get it going, we'll probably do it on stream. We may bring in some friends to work on it too. It'll be great. Okay, so for this, if we've already installed the templates, and let me grab my install command because I don't think I have it because I was testing locally, so I think I blasted my stuff away. So I'm going to install my templates. And so after installing, I can see that I've got all 4 of my templates, and these short names here are the key ones that you want to look for. So at time of recording, 190 is my latest release. You can see the languages here are all C#, and then I've got a handful of tags for what I think makes reasonable sense for this. But for here, we are going to focus on the full WPF application, just to be able to show this. Okay, so I'm going to back up. I'm going to go mkdir WPF sample. Oh, that's not how you do the command. WPF sample cd WPF sample. There we go. Boom. Okay, clear that out. So the way you end up doing this, and we will drop in here. We'll go to the WPF solution one. I have tried to go through and keep my README mildly up to date with some of the interesting stuff that is on here. One of the more recent changes that I have added in has been a pipeline option. So if you want full CI/CD pre-gen for you, there is a GitHub and an Azure DevOps option. The Azure DevOps one I have not fully tested, but it looks correct. So if you run into issues with my templates, please just let me know. The other one is I have updated to using SLNX. So this is a new solution file format. Where is, do I have the docs in here? Pipeline, yeah. So the solution file format, the SLNX, this is a new format for doing solution files for Microsoft. That's not the link I want to show. I think the blog shows it off better. But this is kind of what an old solution file would look like to you. It's kind of ugly, and it gets worse when you start adding stuff in. You get GUIDs everywhere, and this is a living nightmare for merge conflicts. The new solution format is XML based, and it's a PuRTY, and it's normal, and it's nice. This is SLNX is what is roughly the solution equivalent for the Project SDK format that Microsoft introduced, which is great. right? There are a handful of minor issues still out there with it. Like there's a couple open issues on the .NET new template for some of their after build commands where it's not properly added. But for the most part, everything has support for this. Writer supports it, VS Code, Dev Kit, Visual Studio supports it. You do need to be on a mildly recent edition of VS 2022. If you're on something that's like 6 months old or older, you might have to go in and there's a preview flag you have to turn on to get SLNX support. Or like I said, if you're on a modernish release of it, you're fine. It just works. And then the only other thing to be aware of is your build SDK has to be at least, I think, 9.0.202, I think is what it is. I think it was in here, 9.0.200. So this isn't your target framework. You can still target an older framework, but the version of the SDK that you have installed, the one that's actually going to be running build and whatnot, has to be at least 9.0.200. So more than likely what happens is if somebody has like a global.json that's pinning them to say net 8 or something weird, right? This will end up failing because net 8 SDK doesn't know anything about SLNX. You got to be on something mildly newer. But for most people starting a project with a .NET new template, I think it's fair game to say the new solution format is probably reasonable. If you want the old one, I did leave a switch in place, at least for now. I'll probably kill it eventually. But if you want to go back and use the old one, you can do -SLN. So there's some kind of samples there of what you want to do, and we are going to go through here, and we are just going to run the .NET new command to start it. So, and I believe you can do this to get actually all of the help out of it, to see what is possibly in there. It's worth noting there are template options, which are the ones that I define, that my template supports, but then there's some basic ones that all .NET new templates support. So for example, these ones here for name, by default, it just uses the output being created, and it will use your current directory. So the fact that I've named my current directory WPF sample, unless I specify a name when I'm creating this template, it's just going to use WPF sample. And it can show the dry run, and force is the other interesting thing that gets interesting to use, because in the situation where you're like, you know what, I really just want to apply your latest template over the top of my existing app, and I'll use GitKraken or some other diff tool to take out the stuff I don't want. You can actually run .NET new with a template and go -- force, and it will just run over the top of it. Sometimes I'll do this when I know that I've updated, like say my editor config or similar, and I'm like, I just want the latest editor config for my template. I will literally just run .NET new with force and then revert everything but the editor config change. So you can get away stuff like that to be able to get away with it, right? And then different languages, but you know what? Mine only supports C#, so some of these aren't going to do anything with my templates. So we're going to go here. We're going to go .NET new, and I'm going to take everything, right? And we will walk through what to expect when you fire up my template and kind of focus in on some of these features. So first and foremost, things to note right out the gate, there's our solution file, where it sits, and then we're just going to go, I think, kind of bottom up looking at this. So XAML Styler is a Visual Studio extension that provides a lot of formatting options for XAML files. So inside of WPF, this file does nothing if you don't have the extension installed or available. So just be aware, if you aren't using XAML Styler, you don't like it, you can nuke this file, totally fine. You're off to the races. But if you want to see the formatting options that I like, specifically, I like my indentation on my XAML files to be 2 spaces, and I like it to line up my attributes, something I can't quite do in Visual Studio Editor config settings. So having this thing here to actually get that formatting in place is exactly what I like there. README is as one would expect, but let me pop the solution file open, and we'll look at some of these other ones inside of Visual Studio. So we will come in here, and then so there's the XAML Styler settings. You can see a lot of these are fairly defaulted. I think the indent size is one of the key ones that I changed. I can't remember. That might even be its default. Okay, NuGet config. This is something that you should probably have at the root of your repository. The key thing here is having your project specify what NuGet sources it is allowed to use when restoring NuGet packages. So in this case, this probably matches this NuGet config here probably matches what is in most people's default NuGet config at the user profile level. But there is times where, you know, you've added stuff to your user profile or otherwise, and you don't necessarily want that propagating in. More importantly, as a way of securing your supply chain, if somebody were to say compromise a build agent or similar and muck with the NuGet config at the user level out of a build agent, that would be bad. This clear statement here is specifically there to say, okay, whatever package sources you resolve from sources higher up, whack them. This is the only one you're allowed to use. So I put this in my case, because of my current user config, this isn't changing anything. But hypothetically, if this was on a machine that had another NuGet config higher up or at a user profile level, this ensures that I don't accidentally resolve my packages from some other source. Right? It keeps me locked into here, and then everything maps here. It does have a sample down here, and I tried to do this in a lot of places of my template, is leave commented code out for things that people are likely to do or things that I often change. So if you have, say, an Azure DevOps artifacts feed where you might want to go through and resolve packages from as well, this is where you might add in those additional sources. And then the key thing here is just specifying a package pattern for what matches where, right? So that is the NuGet config. We're going to skip over the exclusions dictionary. This is around the spell checker that's in Visual Studio. I have had, it's supposedly fixed. There has been a lot of bugs with this built-in spell checker. Little things like, oh, if the dictionary doesn't have the right file encoding or line ending, it doesn't work. And oh, if you add a thing to it with the control period in Visual Studio, it messes up the format. There's been a lot of things, and I need to go back through and see if it's fixed. All the issues I was tracking have now been marked as resolved by Microsoft. So I think they're all fixed, but I have not validated them myself. Okay, editor config, kind of self-explanatory. This is the editor config for how I like to set up all of these things. You'll note there is kind of an interesting thing here in that it's showing immediately with a star. I've been meaning to go through because the editor config in my template, each version of Visual Studio, they sometimes add additional options in here. And so what this is showing me is the fact that I've opened it in VS 2026 Insiders, that there are new settings that I don't have in my editor config, and the defaults are being populated in for me. Convenient, but if you want to go through and change anything, have at it, right? You can also, and I'm going to hit don't save here, you can also edit your editor config by going open with and just grabbing like the source code editor. Double click, and you can kind of see this structure here. If you edit it in the UI, you don't get this kind of nicer breakdown for file type, right? To see kind of how things are supposed to go. Like I've got my indent level set here as well. This doesn't affect like indent attributes if you span an element across multiple lines inside of XAML. So that's why this doesn't fully work and why I still need XAML styler. But little things like I'm a space guy rather than a tab guy, right? If you don't like it, change it, right? Again, this is Kevin's personal preferences of which way he wants to go. Okay, we then go into the directory build props and the directory build targets. And the targets is empty, but it functionally works the same as the props, and I'll kind of explain here. These two files are magical files that MS Build looks for when compiling your application. So, and I think I put something in here about it. Did I not include anything? Oh, build customization right here. So here are the docs underneath this if you want to dive in more. So there's your build props, build targets files, and the structure of each of those. So these files here get automatically picked up, get automatically applied to all of the projects that are in a folder under this. So you can do one of these files in a nested level, like if you're somebody who likes to have like your .src and /test directories, you could put one of these files in your /test directory and it would apply to all of your test projects. The thing to note is when you are compiling, MS Build will only walk up the directory structure until it runs into the first one of these files, and then it stops. If you want it to keep going, you need to uncomment this line here. this tells it to keep going. So hey, I know you found this one, include it, and then also include the one above it, then also include the one above it. So by default, you only get that one. But this is also the place where I will set up my language version. And apparently my language version probably needs a bit of a bump because 12 is a little old. We're just going to make that bigger. And so now I am on lang version 13 on all my projects, and I didn't have to go through all my CS proj files. There is a Visual Studio Accelerator property that I turn on because it oftentimes will get you a slight bump in compiling speed. Great. I like using implicit usings and nullable reference types. I just turn these things on by default. These are also on by default in the default .NET template. Another one that I tend to do, and again, this is a bit of preference, is if you are using user secrets. Most people aren't familiar with this in WPF, but if you are doing ASP.NET Core, you will oftentimes see these things show up as a way of getting configuration into your iConfiguration instance. We'll see it in WPF in a moment. But what setting this user secrets ID in a directory build props does is this allows all of my projects to have the same user secrets file. Because if we go here and we go, where's my manage user secrets? There. Right, and if I look at this secrets.json file, you'll note that this GUID here, that's the way secrets work is they are just a JSON file in a folder that is not checked into your repository. That's it. That's as secret as they are. So just be aware, your secrets files are only as secure as your app data directory is secure. That's the level of security we're talking about. But they aren't checked in, which makes them very convenient at times for plugging in, API keys or similar that you don't want to accidentally commit to your repository, but you need for debugging or otherwise. Right? And oftentimes what I find is I don't want a separate user secrets file for every single project, which if you let it gen normally, it will set this property up on every project that you add user secrets to. But I kind of want all of mine to share the same user secrets file. Now, this may not work for all projects. It works for mine. If you don't like it, again, comment it out and don't use it. But it's up to you. This just allows me to have one shared user secrets file across all of my projects. Yes, it allows me to inject extra secrets across my projects that I may not have intended. But again, this is a local file, not something checked in for mass configuration. It's literally there for me. So I like setting it up here in my props file. The difference between a props file and a targets file is when they are invoked. So if we look at our CS proj here, when you see this SDK attribute up at the top, secretly what this is doing is this is bringing in the Microsoft.NET.SDK.props at the beginning, and it's bringing in the targets at the end. And that order of operations matters because when MS Build runs, props are something that gets set up at initially, and then targets are things that get brought in at the very back. So sometimes what will happen is you'll set something up in your props, but if something in the SDK overrides that prop, it's no longer there for you at the end. So occasionally it is you end up needing to put things in a targets file because you want to override something in the SDK versus the props file where you need to set it so that it's available for the SDK. Those are kind of in general where you might do it. So props goes first, targets goes second. Functionally, they are both just MS build files that get picked up. There's nothing about a props file that says you can't have targets in it. There's nothing about a targets file that says you can't have properties in it. Again, it's all about ordering, and they're named to try to indicate where things probably should go. Targets generally end up in the targets file because those are things that are going to run, and you probably are chaining them on the end of SDK targets rather than setting them up first where they're going to be blown away. So it's things like that where in general you set properties up so that they can be consumed by the SDK, and you set targets up based on or to run before or after SDK targets. So you want them coming in after the SDK targets are added. So this guy is empty because frankly my default template doesn't have anything worth adding here. But there is that setup. Okay, so there is the top level solution stuff. I'm going to point out just a couple things. So I ran this one by default, and I picked up my GitHub pipeline stuff. This is a little different for DevOps because I don't have like the Dependabot for DevOps set up because it's not nearly as trivial to configure. But for GitHub Actions, if that is where you are deploying your stuff to, I do set up Dependabot to run on a weekly basis to automatically update all of my NuGet packages and my GitHub Actions. All this is Dependabot running, checking to see if there are updated NuGet or GitHub Actions, and if so, it opens up a pull request to say, hey, here's the new version, go ahead and bring it in. The nice part is if you have things set up with good tests and otherwise, oftentimes you can just take the package updates, right? Like ask yourself, if you were to rev that package or version locally, what extra testing would you do that your test suite isn't already covering, right? If the answer is not much, then yeah, just ship it. So I like to have these on by default. I generally turn it on all of mine. Unfortunately, it also means that I usually get spammed by Dependabot once a week, which is great, especially when certain packages push out updates. I just get hammered because, you know, if it's like the Microsoft testing SDK, I'm using that everywhere. And so every single one of my repos hammers me on it. Okay, build app. So this is, again, one of the ways to do it, and there are lots of debates about where things should go. I have considered switching this over to doing like Git versioning. I can't decide. It's slightly more complicated, but also easier is if you know what's going on. So it's, again, up to you. I kind of came to the conclusion that the simplest thing to do was to have a 1.0 the GitHub run number version. And then you manually rev this version when you want to bump the version of your app later. There is a potential problem when you get too high of a number here of this third digit overflowing and you don't have space for it. At that point, you probably need to do something different. Again, I have mixed feelings. I don't quite know how to do this. The key things here is it does assume that you have a main, that your default branch is called main. If that's not the case, if you're on master or similar, change it. But this guy will run on pushes to the main branch, on pull requests, because the assumption here is that you're using pull request to merge in changes. If this is a private repository where you're just cowboying everything into main, you probably don't need this. But I often will even use pull requests even on my private repositories, just because I'm too lazy to run the tests before I push, and so I'll just pull requests and say, I'll let the actions run my test for me. I'm too lazy to do that locally. The other thing is I like to default my shell to PowerShell core. This is something that I tend to do even when I'm compiling on Ubuntu runners or Linux-based runners, is just go to PowerShell core. That way I have one scripting language I have to pay attention to, and I'm not worried about the subtle differences between how you might set variables or do outputs for Bash versus PowerShell. I default it one way and I leave it there. So if you prefer Bash over PowerShell, just switch it. There you go. We are building a WPF app here, so Windows latest is a requirement. We check out our code, we set up .NET, and the key thing here is we set up .NET with the global.json file. Ooh, I just noticed something. My global.json isn't added to the solution. Let me bring that in, because that was something I didn't talk about. We'll circle back to this here in just a moment. So we need to bump that too, apparently, as well. It'll roll forward to the latest feature, so I'll be fine on this particular machine. But when it runs the setup.net, to know which versions of .NET to install, it is leveraging the global.json file. So let's talk about this guy here. This is a file that there's kind of some debate about whether you should or shouldn't have one of these things. This controls your .NET tooling version that's going to go through here. One of the nice things about having it is if somebody fires up your solution and doesn't have the right version of the SDK installed, and they're running a new enough version of Visual Studio to have the feature, they will get a little yellow prompt kind of in this area here showing them, hey, you're missing the required .NET version. Would you like to, click here to install, right? And it'll automate the install for them. You'll also get a slightly better error message if you try to compile and you don't have the right SDK version. So small things like that are kind of convenient. You'll note I do have a roll forward to the latest feature. For doing this, though, it's kind of important to understand how .NET does their versioning. because there's actually 4 numbers here, not just 3, right? So you've got your major version, your minor version, and then this guy here is your quarter, and then the last 2 digits are your patch. So you will note that this digit here is always 100, 200, 300, or 400, because there are 4 quarters in a year. And so they are kind of packing extra data into 3, so they have 4 numbers in 3 digits. So just be aware of that. So when you're doing the roll forward and it's like latest patch or latest feature, just understand that you're targeting this whole thing, so it lets stuff roll forward within the year or similar. Right? So that's just one thing that's worth keeping a hold of. But by having this global.json here, it lets us leverage the setup.net action to say, hey, by the way, that's the version of .net that I want. Because consistently what happens is the new version of .net drops every November, as the schedule is now, and we go, ooh, I want to update to the latest stuff, right? Net 10 is coming out here in a little over a month-ish, because we're October 9th as I record this. So November is Geek Christmas. We get a new .NET. We all rev to Net 10 because we all know how awesome that's going to be, because it looks sick. Spoiler. Oh, actually, slight detour. Spokane.net user group. This, for anyone who's interested. Hey, look, it's me. Come back. Come back. Come back. Come back. Come back. So there is a user group coming up where I'm going to be going over everything that is new in Net 10, which is going to be awesome. So December 2nd, 5 p.m. Pacific time, will be streamed online. You'll note hybrid event. So if you are not local to the area, don't panic. As long as you can hit YouTube, you're good to go. So feel free to sign up, because we like to have a good idea of numbers, and it helps me fill out some forms and stuff. So if you are interested in that. But it now gives us one less area where we are trying to keep our .NET versions in sync, because when the new version comes out, we rev our global.json to get our tooling .NET version updated, and then if we want our target framework that we're going to release for, we bump it here. Right? There is a difference. There is a difference here between target framework of what we're going to compile towards and what we're going to use to compile that. Hey, Izzy, Merry Christmas to you as well. I mean, I have the preview SDK installed because I'm running the Visual Studio Insiders. Works great. I mean, the other thing I'll point out for people, Microsoft did something really cool. Let's see, Net 10 standard support. They added a where is it? The Microsoft offered and I'll have to go hunt the link out. They offered, what did they call it? Like a production support for Net 10 for people who actually want to run production workloads on Net 10. There is a support thing out there for it, because some companies, they won't update to the latest version of .NET until Microsoft has like an STS or an LTS release. So standard term support or long-term support, for those people who don't know the acronyms, which is fine, right? People don't want to be on preview bits. They want something that's actually going to be supported by Microsoft, and typically preview bits don't come with any support at all. Microsoft says, this is what it is, have fun, play, but you don't get support. For Net 10, they actually were like, hey, we'll actually add support for, I think it was RC1 or RC2 of the Net 10 SDK. But you need to pay attention to the support window. It was fairly short. It was only like a couple months. Don't quote me on that. But it was a shorter window. And I believe the expectation is, if you are running a production environment that you can rev to Net 10, you are probably working in an environment where fast iteration is possible, right? You are not working in one of those highly regulated environments where you upgrade once a year, once every 5 years, whatever, right? And so they give us a small support window, and I believe the expectation is that they're going to do the same thing on the next release candidates as well. That way, if you are using it, you can stay in support, but they need you to keep updating to the latest ones to stay in support, right? All the way up until it comes into November, which maybe went till November and that's when they were terminated. I don't remember. It was something shorter like that because they were that confident that it was good enough to run production workloads on it. Like where we were just about to rev to Windows 95. Oh, dear heavens, Izzy. I actually remember doing a Windows 95 install. Oh, boy. That was an adventure. Yes, I am old enough to have used a version of Windows pre-95, which was scary. And I'm not that old. Thank you. Refuse to admit to being old. Okay, so that is the global.json. That's the build. Most of this is fairly simple and straightforward. We compile our app in release mode because that's how we release, and we do specify this p.version. This is where doing versioning like this can potentially overflow because this version does use a system.version as part of the assembly. And system.version has limits on how big numbers can be in each of these digits. So just be aware. It also doesn't allow anything other than the numerics in each of these values. So unlike NuGet versions where you can, the last bit you can tack on like /alpha or /preview or whatever you want, and it's happy to accept alphanumeric in the last section, system.version is not okay with that. Which one? 3.3.1 or 3.11? Ooh, Izzy, you're dating yourself that you know that much, but 3.1. 3.1 is the one that I had originally. My kind uncle gifted me a 3.1 machine that I think it had been something that retired from his work or similar. And admittedly, I was too young to know what it was, but it was really fun to plunk around on and play games on and whatnot, and I loved that little machine. It was wonderful. I was very sad when it died. Okay. After we compile, we run test, and this is where things get mildly interesting, is when you run tests, we specify the same configuration, and we specify -- no build. Something I see people mess up on a lot is they do something like this, and the default configuration is debug, and when you don't compile, .NET Test doesn't do anything because it sees no output in the bin release directory. So that doesn't work. So just make sure that you test against the same configuration that you compile against, especially if you're specifying no build. The other thing I see people do is something like this, where they compile release and then test debug, which isn't great because if you have a pound if debug, you're now testing against something not what you built for. So yeah, don't do that. And then the last thing is the code coverage, because we'll see that get used a little bit later, but I also specify it into a .build.coverage directory. Putting your build artifacts in a .build folder is just kind of a convention-y thing that a lot of stuff does. And then I do a report generator, just taking the output XML files and building up a code coverage report. Again, we'll see that in a moment. And then I write the PR number, and this is gonna matter here in a moment. So once again, inside the build directory, I am just arbitrarily creating a file called pull request number where I'm just dumping the pull request number in here. And this is only possible when this build is running because the trigger was pull request. Because this event.number isn't going to represent a pull request number if it's, say, a build from my main branch. So, let's see. With all the floppy disks, LOL. No one these days remembers that pain. It's just download it and run it. I know. I used to have a stack of fun colored floppy disks that my wife turned into a nice Christmas wreath. She took all the red and green ones. So I will pull that out and show it on stream when we get it out for Christmas, because that's always fun. So we write this PR number. Again, we'll see usage of this in a minute. And then finally, we upload the code coverage report. And you'll note both the PR number file and the code coverage report are both inside this same directory. And then also, just as a fail-safe, if there are no files in this directory, I assume something has gone catastrophically wrong, and I throw an error and die because I don't want to continue. Finally, if we are not a pull request, we are going to go through and do a .NET publish, because this is actually taking your published app and saying, okay, now we're going to get a published version that we can ship out somewhere. And at some point, I am going to add Velopack publishing into this template. So it'll probably be a -- no Velopack or some option like that for people who don't want it. But I've just started publishing all of my apps that way, so I kind of want it in here because, again, this is how Kevin likes to build and publish his apps. But once again, I'm specifying a publish directory where this output is going to go, along with a version in here. And you'll note there's a small category here. If publishing single file, remove the -- no build, because when you publish single file, you actually need to have another compile here to get the single exe. So if you turn that option on, which I believe I have commented out here, for doing single file applications. So you'll note even in the CS proj, you'll need to remove the no build option from the .NET Publish. So if you are wanting just a self-contained single file exe, this is the stuff you turn on, right? Just be aware that this is the stuff that goes in. And there's a very specific publish single file bit here. Because this is done as part of a build step, not the publish step, you do need to actually recompile. It also breaks some tooling, like the built-in XAML Explorer, when you have things like publish single file turned on, which is why I have this configuration, not debug. So locally, as long as you're running debug, all the tooling works. If you go release, things like the XAML Explorer won't work properly. So just be aware of that. That's one of the downsides of single file, but if you want it, you uncomment this, and you drop the -- no build here, and you should be good to go. And then uploads the artifacts, good to go. We're off to the races. This last one here is a action that I really, really enjoy. So this is a auto merge on Dependabot PRs. So this is very specific, and it does require you to do a little bit of setup on your repository to make sure that you have the right repository settings set up. More importantly, in order to autocomplete a PR, you have to have a handful of, and this should open up my PowerShell script, you have to have a handful of things set up, like enabling auto merge on your repository. I prefer to have linear builds here, so I turn off things like merge commits and favor squashes and rebases. So just be aware, there is some extra setup to have this thing work. Again, I prefer to have this because if my pipeline builds and passes, it means my app compiled, it means my tests all pass. It's probably not that bad to merge the Dependabot PR, right? So unless I have a reason to not do it, I oftentimes will let my Dependabot PRs auto merge, which is convenient because then all my dependencies are typically up to date. I don't fight CVEs nearly as much. It's just convenient. So this is the setup for that. If you don't want your Dependabot stuff auto merging, just get rid of this job. You don't need it, right? And that gets you down to here. Now we still have one more action to look at, and it has to do with this pull request stuff. So let's go here. And if we look into here, this code coverage comment. So you will note this code coverage PR comment runs on a workflow completion of build WPF sample. So it's worth noting that these things are linked based upon this name. So this code coverage comment runs when this workflow is completed. Okay, simple enough. Workflow A finishes, workflow B runs. But you'll note the trigger for this is now a workflow run, not a PR or otherwise, right? And so it comes in here and goes, okay, wait a minute. What we need to know is, was the other thing a pull request? And if so, did it succeed? So if it did, what we're going to do is we're going to download those artifacts, specifically the code coverage artifacts that we uploaded, and we have to leverage the GitHub token to grab them. We pull out the pull request number, which is that extra file that we wrote, and we store it in a variable that we can then reference further down here. And then we use this sticky pull request comment action. So the idea here is a sticky comment. It has a commented line inside of the GitHub comment that identifies it, so that if you post this comment multiple times, rather than just always appending a new comment to the pull request, it'll just update the existing comment. This is this recreate here of how it's able to do that. And so it goes through and it takes the generated report from over here, the code coverage report, and it says, okay, I'm going to go ahead and post the code coverage as a comment on the PR, just as a nice way of being able to see what the code coverage of the PR was. Because oftentimes what I see people do is they run the code coverage and it's part of the pipeline, but it's very easy to miss. Again, something I like. If you don't like it doing this, you can get rid of it, right? And so once again, there is a little bit of setup that you need to do to enable this functionality to work. Some people may not like this. Again, I try to leave appropriate comments where they are. Okay, that is all of the stuff out. That is all the stuff in my template outside of the app before we even get to the WPF app. And you will find that in a lot of my templates, a lot of this same stuff is just the same, right? Same principles, same files, same technology, maybe some tweaks around a handful of them, but there's not a lot of differences there. Right? Let's look at the test one first. So this one is one that we may be updating tonight because I've got an open Copilot PR that I need to go review. You will note the I skipped over the directory packages props earlier. So this is leveraging something called centralized package management. Because one of the things that gets very annoying is revving packages and having NuGet packages at different versions on different projects. In most cases, you want your version of, say, XUnit to be the same on every single project. And you'll note this is not running XUnit v3. That's one of the things in the other PR that's going to be updated to, is I want XUnit v3 in here rather than vold, because cool and newer and nicer is better. But again, some stuff that I prefer to have for my testing, I like using mock, MOQ. I like using my AutoMock library. And so it should just, again, things that I like to use. Let's see, Izzy. Rev to 530 yesterday. I thought I would try the inherit on secondary color of a custom theme. My boss didn't like it. Fair enough. I can't always change people's. Also turned on the blur for draw host, and he kept trying to adjust his goggles, thinking he was not seeing it properly. Sadly, I had to go back to the ugly old style. Well, okay, at least you're not telling me there's bugs in it, so that's good. To each his own. Yeah, you could try dialing up the blur a little higher. I don't remember where we set the default radius on it. It may be a little low. It's one of those things that the blur is not necessarily part of the spec, but it shows up in a lot of implementations. And so I think it was Corvin's that added it. Default, I think, is 7. Yeah. And depending on how big your window typically is, you may want to go a little higher. But I mean, that's why we left it configurable, because it's kind of hard to know exactly what the appropriate blur radius is. Some people want it showing through more, and it's like, oh, if you do too high of a blur radius, it, you know, I can't tell what's under it anymore. It's like, yeah, then tweak it. So it's not, that isn't something that's actually called out in the spec. It's just something we added because it's common enough. My dev config turns it on. Nice. Yeah, because there is a lot of nice stuff that's in there. And yeah, the inherit on the secondary color, like, that is one of those things where it's like, maybe people like it, maybe people don't. It kind of depends. I find that people who have a strong branding of their application probably don't leverage inherit that much, but people who are building more like consumer focused apps are more likely to use something like that. So it kind of depends on the target audience a little bit, on where it makes sense to use it, because inheriting somebody's Windows theme color may legitimately make some parts of your app look worse, because you have to kind of account for the fact that it could be kind of anything, even though most people are probably just picking one of the, I don't know, 16 Windows-based colors. But there is, it is one of those things. It's like, it's nice when it feels like it matches what the user set. But if you've got a really strong themed app, maybe not. Maybe not. Okay. Anyway, so test project. Let's see. Actually tried it on both floors and set the color adjust. I like it that way. Yeah, I personally like to leave my color adjust turned on, because otherwise I find that if I allow the user colors to come in and I don't leave the color adjust on, there's almost always something that I can't read. And so letting it auto adjust the colors and just say, you know what, I care less about the colors than I do about accessibility, therefore make it readable. I like it a lot better. So it's just the way I roll. But again, I tend to build slightly, like outside of my day job, I tend to build more consumer-y facing thingies rather than, we'll call them line of business apps, where I think people get a little more picky about, no, I want it to be branded like my company and I don't want it to ever change. Okay, fine. Fine. Don't give your users choice. I get it. Okay, test CS Proj. So a couple things that I turn on here is test project is one of the things that MS Build uses just to identify test projects. And then packable and publishable are just turned off so that when you run .NET Pack or .NET Publish against the solution, this guy intentionally gets excluded from that set of things that might get published. So if you add more projects to my solution, just be aware, if you don't turn these things on, or turn these things off, it may bite you. I may migrate these ones out of here and move them up to the directory props and just automatically apply them to any project that ends in .tests. I don't, it's one of those things where it's like, it's more convenient, but it's also more magical. And I try to balance a little bit between what's convenient and what's good. But a lot of my bigger solutions that I work with, there's typically a naming scheme for test projects. And so I will oftentimes leverage my props file to automatically toggle these things for everything that matches a project that's a unit test name. Yeah, it helps when you can make things that cannot be branded. Yeah, everything is just black and gray. Exactly. But on the centralized package management, you do have the ability, if you ever find that you do need to override, there is a version override that you can specify on a per project level. So if you have then your centralized version of what it's supposed to be, but you decide, hey, you know what, I'm going to override and I want 5.3.0 in my WPF app, great, you can version override there. You'll also note I bring in a lot of the DI stuff. We'll look at that in a moment, as well as the MVVM toolkit, which is just absolutely awesome. These are the properties for going through and enabling centralized package management. This one here is critical for when you're dealing with vulnerable NuGet package, because what will happen is, say material design has a CVE in one of its dependencies, right? Not in the library itself, but something it references. Maybe it references, you know, one of systemtext.json, and there's a CVE in version 8.0.0 or something, right? What you can do is you can add a reference to the transitive dependency in your directory packages props and update that dependency to the version you want. And then this will automatically pin that transitive dependency to that newer version. Because by default, when NuGet is figuring out which dependency to bring in, it brings in the lowest version that satisfies all constraints, which is okay, but oftentimes lower versions have vulnerabilities and newer versions don't. So being able to rev those transitive dependencies and pin them is something I often use. Let's see, don't you ever use multi-level directory props? Yeah, so if you have your things set up with like a source and a props file, I absolutely will go that route when possible. And that's why in my template I have this line here to say, hey, if you do put one of these things down underneath like a test directory, but you still want to have, say, like your Lang version set at the repo level, you can kind of chain them together, because I always, frankly, forget the syntax for this line. And so I leave it commented here so I can go, yep, thank you very much. That's exactly what I needed. Good to go, right? So if I did end up putting one down, my templates don't nest the test projects underneath like a source or test folder. I've contemplated giving that a run, but it's one of those, it's like my samples are small enough that I I only do that if the project is going to be big enough and warrants it, and it warrants that. So at least for my templates, it's kind of like, I don't know if I jump immediately there unless I know that my app is going to need it. Let's see. How do I debug material design controls in my app? I can't step through the code when I install the library through the NuGet package. I manually downloaded the source code and added the reference to the thing, to the material design thing, WPF. I assume that's project or DLL and the WPF project, but I'm not able to set it up correctly. Great question. So I can actually show you right here on this one that I've got, because this thing has this guy here. So one of the things that should hopefully be working, if I go here, is if you have SourceLink enabled, because the fact that you're wanting to go through and debug, I assume we're talking about the C# side, and just, F11 type thing. So if you have SourceLink enabled, you should actually be able to step through the NuGet package. I hope. Now I'm going to go double check to make sure that I'm not misremembering, and I do have SourceLink turned on, because SourceLink should be enabled on this guy. I just realized packages is lowercase. That's dumb. Oh, do I not have SourceLink enabled? Well, we're going to be fixing that here. Okay, I take that back, Hazen. I don't have SourceLink enabled, and I should fix that. Because SourceLink allows you to step into code when the source is hosted out on a public repository. So scratch what I said about that. Apparently, I don't have it set up on the Material Design Library. I have it set up on other libraries and not this one, and I should fix that. So that is something that we may discuss here in a moment as well. But for what you end up needing to do, so because I have both of these checked out, what I would end up doing if I wanted to not use the NuGet package, so I'll comment out the package reference here. I will go add project reference, and actually I think I have to do this. You have to actually bring the projects into your solution, because otherwise it will not reference it. And there are two that you're going to need to do. You're going to need to grab the WPF one, and because the WPF one has a dependency on the colors one, you also need to add in the colors repository, or the colors project as well. So I'll come in here, material design colors, boom, boom, boom. And then on my WPF sample, I can now add project reference, and I can reference material design themes here. And then if I change this guy up to my WPF app, I should be able to run. Chris, welcome, raiding party. It is good to have you guys. Hopefully you had a good stream. I saw you were on earlier. And thank you, Ben Codes, for the follow. I appreciate it. Super good. Excellent. We are going through my some .NET templates that I have, if anybody is interested in .NET-based stuff. But just walking through everything that I have embedded into my template for building out new .NET projects. I went way too late, but that just meant I could raid you, so win-win. See, that's what we're talking about. And thank you for the follow. I'm the dev. Hopefully I got that. I am the dev, Alex. So welcome all. But yeah, going through some of this, and then if people are actually interested in .NET related stuff, I'm speaking at a user group coming up in December. Don't worry, it is live streamed on YouTube, but it is 5 p.m. Pacific time. So adjust that to whatever time zone you happen to be in yourself. Yes. So, and then and then Heisen, just to answer your question, poof, now I'm off to the races, and I have my WPF library loaded up in here that I can now debug as though it was any other library. And so now I've got all my stuff. I can come in here, I can set breakpoints on this, and there we go. So key steps to note is you need to make sure to include both the themes WPF project and the colors WPF project in your solution. And then you should be able to replace the NuGet package reference with just a project reference straight to the material design themes WPF. And between those two, you should be good to go. I hope. Awesome, Chris. Have fun gaming. I may end up having to lurk you later after I get through here, because there's always a handful of extra things to always do. But thank you for coming and joining. For people who don't know, Chris does a lot of gaming and coding streams. I don't know, Chris, if you have anything about what you were working on. It tends to be, I'm trying to remember your latest project that you were working on. Always extra stuff. Exactly. But Chris also is one of the, I'm trying to remember your title, Get Crackin' dev outreach person. Yeah, working on my slides for a pre-recorded talk for React Summit. Oh, cool. That'll be awesome. Developer advocate. There's the magical term we're going for. Yes. So for people who are at all interested, he is absolutely awesome, and I thoroughly enjoy all of his talks on like the history of, Git Lens, Git Kraken, etc., and how the development stuff goes. So give him a follow, check out his stream, because it's always pretty cool. Okay. And where were we going? Oh, so hopefully there, Heisen, in app.xaml for material design, do I have to do anything differently after adding the project references? You shouldn't need to, assuming your template looks very similar to mine, because the XAML namespace references should still be the same here. For anybody wondering, yes, this URL leads you to a bad gambling site. Unfortunately, it's a major breaking change to change an XML namespace reference. And the original owner of the library apparently let his DNS lapse, and somebody is now domain name squatting on him. So don't go to this URL. That's bad. But no, it should just work for you, Heisen, because inside of here, my app is now off to the races and running and compiling without any NuGet package reference anymore, just with a singular project reference. And you'll note the project reference is pointing to where I have downloaded the source code from to be able to get it up and running. So just between those two things, if that doesn't work, let me know, but it should be as simple as getting rid of this package reference, adding in a project reference, and then making sure both of these projects are actually in your solution. Because when you have a project reference, MS Build needs to know where the projects are so that it can do the project dependency tree and compile them in order for you. So, but other than that, you should be good. And then off to the debugging thing, and we will see about adding source link to the library, because that I thought I had done that a long time ago. So apparently I have not added source link, and I need to actually do that. So that is bad on me. Okay, I'm going to drop these here real quick, and we're going to stop debugging. That way we can kind of continue stepping through some of the stuff. And then save changes, don't save. Thank you. And then I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to put this guy back so that then I'm just going to build real quick to make sure we're back in a working space. What are you unhappy about? Restore the package. It's there. Rebuild. There you go. So that build error there, I don't know if that's similar to what you may have got, Heisen, was because the Visual Studio does a package restore in the background. And so if you try to compile before it's done restoring packages, it will no worky. So, okay. So back on the test project. A handful of things I prefer to bring in, and then the other feature that's worth calling out is something called global using statements. So C# added these in Net 8, I believe, for giving you a way to avoid having to put using all the stuff, because you'll note, even though I'm using the XUnit fact attribute, I didn't have to go up to the top and go using XUnit, all of that stuff. And you can see my IDE is even graying it out, saying, hey, you moron, you don't need this. This is duplicated. So the idea with global usings, and you will see a lot of the base .NET templates do global usings in a global using.cs file, which is fine. It works. It does this, right? That's all it's doing, is generating one of these global usings in a file for you, and they just happen to name it global usings.cs. The only thing I don't like about that is then you have to either file link that global using file in, or you have to duplicate it across every project. When you do it using MS Build, you can then leverage things like your directory build props, directory build targets to be able to share these same global usings across multiple projects. And so like Izzy was saying earlier about if you put a directory build props in, say, a test directory, then all of your test projects magically pick up this same global using. So again, setup that I prefer. You don't have to use it if you don't like, but I think it is worth doing in a lot of cases, because it just makes your test projects easier to write, and especially whatever test framework you're using, you are almost assuredly putting a using to that framework at the top of every single one of your files. So the tests here are not overly interesting. There's a regular unit test for people unfamiliar with the pattern. I always favor the AAA pattern for structuring my unit tests: arrange, act, and then assert. Some basic guidance that I often give people is your name should reflect the contents of your unit test. So the first part of it should be reflective of what is being tested, the condition under which it's being tested, and then finally the expected outcome. Because when a test starts failing, one of the hardest things to figure out is which end is wrong. Because when a test fails, you want to know, hey, is the test wrong and it needs to be updated, or is the code wrong and needs to be fixed, right? So having that information captured in the name of the test almost works like a checksum to say, hey, is the code wrong or is the test wrong? Because if you come in here and go, well, the test is doing exactly as the name implies, great. That either means some assumption is wrong about, and the code is changed from when the test was originally written, and now you need to update it. But now it gives you all of that information without having to kind of parse through the test to figure it out. There's just a sample here about a data-driven test in XUnit, because I figured I would show off both of those, and then finally just one down here of going through and doing. The last comment I'll make on the testing stuff is you will see some people make comments about only test a single thing or only have a single assert or similar. I usually don't subscribe to the you can only have one assert in your test, even though that's how these are set up. I usually tell people that you should only assert on one logical thing, right? That may take multiple assertions, but you should only assert on the stuff that you claimed in your unit test name. Right, so sometimes that takes 2 or 3 asserts to get there, or whatever it's going to be. I think the pedantic idea of only one assert statement is a little too restrictive, and it doesn't really work in the real world. So that is everything with the unit testing. Oh, actually, I do want to call out a couple more things. So AutoMocker is a kind of like a DI, dependency injection container for your tests. Specifically, it's one that I help maintain. The big idea here is it decouples your test from the constructor. So you'll note I am never calling new main window anywhere inside of here. What about mocking versus integrations? Oh, Codex here. Great question. I'll address that too. The idea here with having the constructor decoupled is oftentimes if you add a constructor parameter, you don't want to go through and update a bunch of tests that may or may not be using that parameter. Now, there may be an argument for separation of concerns, that kind of thing, but nothing is more frustrating than making a small change and then spending three times the amount of effort to fix all of the tests that are really only there because they're coupled to the constructor. So this gives you a way to decouple from the constructor, and it'll populate dependencies with mock objects instead. The question there about mocking versus integrations and similar, I actually oftentimes will tell people I think mocks are kind of a necessary evil, and specifically when possible, I prefer to actually write my own test doubles. there's a pattern that is not well documented called port adapter simulator, where rather than mocks, you actually write simulators that serve as your test doubles. And the idea there is the simulator is actually, because a mock is not the real thing. And so the only assurances that your test has that the mock is a good substitute for the real thing are you promising that you've set it up properly. Whereas with a simulator, if you use the simulator in all of your tests, if it turns out that your simulator doesn't appropriately simulate the real thing accurately, you can fix that in one place, and now all of your tests gain the benefit from that, which is really nice. Some people don't like that because it literally means, or in their mind, you're writing the implementation twice. It's like, yeah, but one is like an in-memory implementation, and then one is a not in-memory implementation. And that is really, really awesome to be able to have both of those. So on a lot of my projects, I will actually build those types of simulator test doubles, and you can go even crazier and make the in-memory implementation. I actually write tests over the I know this sounds crazy, but you can write tests over the in-memory implementation to guarantee that it's a good substitute for the real implementation, and now you're really cooking. So again, there's time versus return, and so that is one of those areas where it's like, that is, if I have my way and I have infinite time and I care a lot about the quality and I'm not just trying to churn something out, port adapter simulator tends to be my go-to. And so I will still use AutoMocker as my DI kind of container, but you can just do something like mocker.use, and then I can just inject my simulator types into here. And then when I call create instance, AutoMocker will go, oh, okay, I've got a simulator for this thing. Oh, I don't have a simulator for this other thing, so I'll use a mock for that. And then it just builds it all up for me, and it works really great, which is awesome. The other thing that I do have up here is this constructor test. This actually generates out, and I think I can show it, assuming it's not going to ruin my day. Let's see. Is it, where is it at? Oh, it's underneath analyzers, I think is where this thing lives. Test generator. Oh boy, Ntanatai 101. Thank you very much for the follow. Let's see. Codex here. I've never done any C# unit testing and was thinking about it earlier today, so this is very timely. Oh, perfect. I'm glad I could line it. And thank you for the follow. The idea with the and it's not showing the full implementation here, which is bothering me. This will actually generate out. So some companies, I think, get over eager and they grade on code coverage numbers. And they say, you know, your code always has to have 80% coverage or something, otherwise it fails the pipeline. I personally disagree with that assessment because, in my opinion, code coverage is a negative metric. You don't have 80% coverage, you have 20% non-covered, because you can't say anything about the quality of the covered code because it depends on the quality of the tests. I can write tests that just blindly execute code and get my coverage numbers up, but if I've got garbage asserts or garbage setups, that coverage means nothing. Whereas the code that is not executed, the thing that's uncovered, I can tell you 100% that's uncovered. That has got no tests, and you know there's a potential for risk there, right? So I always hate when people say, "Oh, you got to get code coverage up to 80%," because it's like, no, it's what you're really saying is I don't want to tolerate more than 20% uncovered, but people often forget that coverage is kind of meaningless. And so I actually built this source generator here because often, especially if you're building a library, you should null check incoming constructor arguments to make sure that they aren't null or similar. And the problem is each one of those checks to say, is this null or not, ruins your coverage numbers. Because if you only ever test the happy case, like with create instance, mock or create instance isn't going to send in a null unless you do some effort to force it to. It's going to always try to put a value in there for you. And so it leaves 50% of those lines in your constructor uncovered. This literally just gens up a bunch of tests against the constructor. And then each of those tests, it inserts null for each argument one at a time and validates that you throw an argument null exception with the right parameter name. That's it. And it is literally there out of laziness and to make it so that I don't pay a code coverage penalty when I write code for people who have those checks on their pipelines. So I got so annoyed with it, I built a tool to auto my way out of it so that I wasn't, getting dinged on that. And because in my opinion, the tests that this generates are low value tests. Just to be clear, I built the feature and I think it generates low value tests. But it's only there for people who have like hard caps on their coverage numbers and go, well, we don't care if you're writing low value tests. We want the test coverage. It's like, anyway, yeah. So hate that. But again, my choice of libraries, Mock and AutoMocker are my go-to tools. I kind of like XUnit, but TUnit is really growing on me. So if you're looking for test frameworks, those are my go-tos. Okay, now we get to the actual app, right? We started with a WPF app template, and we haven't actually opened the app up. Okay, so key things in here that are automatically set up for you is I do set an app icon. And this is only here as a way to show people how to set their app icons, because I see so many desktop apps with the default WPF icon that looks like it was from like late Windows Vista days. So please, 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 please change the icon. I thought about making this something really ugly, but instead I put my little logo thing in there. I'm a bit torn on this because I'm worried that at some point somebody's going to distribute an app, not change the icon, and then somebody's going to blame me. So I may regret this decision. But the idea here is to show people, please make an icon, change it, do something useful. This sets it up. This is the single exe publishing. If you want to compile your WPF application down to a single exe that you can slap on a thumb drive or otherwise, and distribute that way, great. This is what you need to do to turn that on. Again, I have it off only because it mucks with debugging tools. And so I oftentimes don't use this because I'm deploying with Velopack, not as a standalone exe, but it is a common way that people want to build out their tools, so I leave it in here. The package references we talked about a little bit for the centralized package management already. The key ones here is obviously my material design library because I love it. And then the MVVM toolkit. Now, for people who are new here, if you check out my YouTube video and Hunt Community Toolkit, you will find a couple videos I have done on like Learn WPF or Learn Avalonia with MVVM, where I dive into a lot of the features of this community toolkit. This is a must-have for any .NET project that is working with MVVM. So it's not WPF specific. You can use it on Uno, Maui, Avalonia, WPF. I don't think WinForm's binding engine really works as well with it, but you can leverage it in plenty of places. I even have a colleague that used it in a Blazor application because why not, right? Not really the designed use case, but anywhere where you have a good binding engine, this is a go-to tool to absolutely use for it. The last thing I'm going to point out here is this subtle change with the app.xaml that's going on here. Now, the resources app icon, this is just to make sure that the app icon is included inside of the WPF sample and shows up as content. But this change here is actually a deviation from the WPF tooling and SDK. So typically what happens is if you right click on your app.xaml and go properties, what you will see, and we're going to collapse Copilot, is this build action is actually set to application definition. And when it is set to application definition, it does a number of things, including generate your main method. So for people who are like, WPF apps don't have a main method. They do. It's just auto-generated for you from your app.xaml, which is fine for some cases, most cases probably. But for the setup that I like to use with the generic host, I need to control the main method. So this sort of setup here is what you will see in WPF applications where they explicitly want to override the main method. And so we drop out of the application definition, which does the application startup with the main method and whatnot. Because once you do this, it says, okay, take it out. We still want it treated as XAML, so we bring it back in as just an arbitrary XAML page so that we still get the XAML compiling and that kind of thing for it. Because we want that. We just don't want the extra application stuff that goes along with it. So with that, let's actually look at it. So on the setup here, this is set up with the material design basics for kind of, if you follow the getting started guide for material design, this is what you get. I have it pointed at the material design 3 default style, but you can change the 3 to a 2 if you prefer those. It's just the 3 has some slightly newer styles for some of the controls, so I like them a little better. And then I just used the bundled themes, and the purple and light green color selection here was arbitrary based on nothing other than they matched my icon. And so I went, great. And then the base theme is either light, dark, or inherit. In this case, it's inherit, which on all of my system means I'm going to get a dark theme because it says look at the system theme and follow that. So if you would prefer to control the colors, you can set things up here. The material design library has more documentation on it, but there is also like custom colors if you don't like the built-in sets and you want to, control all the things. You can control all the things if you would like. But let's look at the code behind for it. So this is the key thing, that once you turn off the application definition, you're now on the hook for actually starting up the application and running it. And specifically doing something akin to these lines here is what the built-in WPF application definition would generate for you inside of a main method. It does roughly this. I say roughly because this line here is different, but most of this is in line with this. And the key thing here is we have a regular main method, and then we have an async main because we are leveraging asynchronous code for setting this up. And then this leverages what is called a generic host. So for people who build ASP.NET Core applications, they are very familiar with like their startup CS, or if they're using top level statements in their program CS, where they've got kind of this host builder and they do like a bunch of configure services, and then further down they do some sort of host build and then run or similar, right? This is a generic host that Microsoft put out. That same .NET user group page, there's actually a talk that I did on the generic host of a lot of what it gives you. Some key things are dependency injection, some built-in logging, and your configuration bits, which is what we are leveraging here. So we build up our host, and down in this create host builder, this is where we go through and add in all of our app configuration. So for here, I'm bringing in the defaults. So there are things like app settings.json that come in with the defaults, but I am also adding in the user secrets for my assembly as well. And then this is where we end up doing dependency injection for anything that we're going to end up using. And I just show some examples here of things that I am injecting. For bigger apps, I would not just let this little callback grow to infinity. That's unmanageable. I oftentimes will break out this DI stuff into a separate class where I can kind of group things accordingly. Very much for anybody who's worked with .NET Aspire, their kind of service defaults idea, they pull it into a separate project. For a desktop application, I just pull it into a separate file. But the important ones here are the main window and the main window view model are both registered as DI dependencies. That's going to matter here in a minute when we look at the main window view model. And then I just show bringing in the weak reference messenger. And specifically here, this is showing in daisy chaining DI dependencies, where you end up, you register the weak reference messenger as itself, as a singleton, and then we register it as an iMessenger. So these are the two keys that if it's asked for in a constructor parameter, the DI container can now resolve it either as a weak reference manager or an iMessenger. But if we just did add singleton on both of these, you could end up with two separate references, which is not what you want. You want a single reference. And so this call over here, what this ends up doing is saying, okay, if somebody asks for an iMessenger, call back into the DI container, get the weak reference messenger instance, and return that as the singleton. So both of these end up with the same instance with two registered keys. And then we register the dispatcher because the number of times we need the dispatcher, for example, like this, to be able to do UI stuff, we often need. If you end up doing a lot of this in the view models, I often put this behind an interface just for testability purposes. But at least here, the dispatcher is registered as a way to just let the snack bar message queue be able to reference back to it. Because if you have a snack bar reference queue that you need to do a little snack bar reference, it is convenient to be able to have that guy leveraged here. Okay, we've built up our generic host. We then start our generic host, and the configure await true here is so that we do the continuation, which is this bit here, on the same thread that we came in on. And because this is only invoked from here, where it was an STA thread, this ensures that our app is created up on the UI thread, which is important. We need to make sure that our UI application is actually instantiated and initialized on our UI thread. Same with the main window. Now, when we call get required service for main window, what's going to end up happening is it's going to invoke this constructor here. So you'll note this constructor takes in the view model as a DI dependency. And I intentionally set the data context before calling initialize component, because if you set it after, you can re-trigger bindings and cause a second pass that is otherwise unnecessary if you set it up ahead of time. So this is a DI dependency here, but in order to resolve this dependency, the DI container first has to resolve the main window view model. So we'll jump into that guy there. And this is why the source gen stuff didn't show a constructor test, because there are no parameters here. Let's see, Izzy, I just got to my coffee shop. Other drink types are available. Sound like Brit. Very much Channel 4 reference. I have been shouting at my phone since the code coverage stuff. Hopefully shouting at your phone and not at me. Question mark. But the DI container then resolves the main window view model, gets that all instantiated, and so it gives a nice way of doing DI injection, because oftentimes with the default WPF app template from Microsoft, it kind of just leaves you to figure all of this stuff out. And so I very much prefer to have this DI style dependency so that I could use, say, my auto mocker to inject and break it apart, and having some way of bringing these things together. There is one minor limitation in all of this, in that if you want to do like DI inside of a user control that's then referenced inside of your XAML, it gets a little more tricky. One of the material design maintainers, Nikolai, has a pretty slick way of working around that, and I've been contemplating pulling in an example using that setup just to show a user control if people want it, because it quite often comes that once you start DI injecting all the things, you then get to a user control and go, I'm stuck. Let's see, Izzy, I think code coverage is a good and important metric, but only if you do mutation tests to ensure your tests are actually useful and valid. I tend to use striker.net. Okay. See, and I can agree with that, in that if you have some way of asserting that your tests are good, then code coverage could be a positive metric. And yeah, mutation tests are like, there is also then a trade-off of the performance of doing all of those. But yeah, maybe we should do a section on doing like striker.net for mutation testing. That would be fun. We should add that to the queue of things to cover, because that might be an interesting one to go through and show off. And then last thing in here, I leave an example of doing a command binding just as a way of showing, hey, you don't always have to shell back to your view model for commands. In this case, there is a menu option here for the exit. So there's a clear count, which is a binding into a command in my view model, but then there's also a routed command that's leveraged here. And the big idea with routed commands is when they are executed, they start from the element that executed them and walk up the visual tree until they find a handler. In this case, the menu item is the one that initiates the close command, but the main window registers the command binding that handles it. And when that command is executed, it calls on close and just closes the window. Just as a simple way of showing, hey, this is typically, if you have like various buttons in your application that might close the window or similar, a routed command is often an easy way of doing this. I've seen people do all kinds of gymnastics when a simple routed command will do this. Let's see, we can add it to the Enigma app. That's actually a great idea. We should totally do that. I kind of teased it a little bit because I'm gonna work on my Avalonia template a bit, and then once you get me the stuff to move on next with, then I'll have a nice clean template to fire off from. So yeah, we should totally add that. The app he's alluding to is the one that I mentioned at the beginning of the stream. We're gonna build a little app for an Enigma machine, and I won't spoil too much on it until we get to it, but it'll be cool, and it's open source, and well, yeah, it'll be fun. It'll be fun. It's going to be fun. I'm very excited for it. Okay, and then the last thing here is just the view model. And this thing is, there's not a lot of code here because the MVVM toolkit is really doing all of the heavy lifting for us. The key things here are deriving from observable object. For people who are familiar with MVVM and WPF, you'll note that the iNotify property change interface is key for all of the binding, and that's really what this community toolkit is giving us, is a lot of source gen functionality around those observable objects with the properties. So rather than making a full observable property, which again, if you check out my YouTube channel, you'll see the Learn MVVM videos. I kind of break down how the observable property works and how much goes into actually implementing it properly. The community toolkit makes it a declare a field and slap a property on it and you're done, right? You only do this when it's like, well, when this property changes, I also want to have this other command kicked off downstream as well. Great. And then down here, same sort of thing. With MVVM, you have this idea of the iCommand interface, which is effectively the action portion of all of this. It's a button click happens, what code then runs after. And so it just separates out having to go from button click all the way in. The iCommand interface also handles things like should the command be able to be executed, which often results in, say, the button being disabled if the command can't currently execute, which is great. Like quite often that's kind of the functionality you want, and you don't want to always have to bind like the is enabled of a button just to prevent the click. So having that all kind of wrapped up in this commanding style pattern is great. Codex here, awesome. Yeah, drop by anytime, stream the same time every week, and I tend to do tons of .NET related stuff. So yeah, feel free to drop in, and always love questions and feedback and similar from people. So always happy to take stuff. And so this can execute here is really that portion of that command that says, hey, is this command able to be run? This looks like it's an arbitrary string, but if you were to say, go in here and do something like this, and assuming, so for example, right, that this could prove myself that I'm not crazy. Right, this looks like an arbitrary string, right? But if I do this and then try to compile, because this is source generated, I actually get a compile error now saying, hang on, something's wrong, this isn't quite working properly, because even though it's stringy like, it's a string that's parsed by a source generator that's executed as part of the compilation, so it's kind of compile time checked. So you can't really typo the string even if you tried. But it does give you that nice way of wrapping up that whole, what's the execution action and can I execute that action? And that gets you all the way through here. I think that is potentially every single thing in my WPF template. Let me just check my list to make sure I didn't, oh, that's the NuGet one. Let me just make sure I didn't miss anything in here. Pipeline stuff, we did generic host, centralized packaging management, build customization, MVVM, material design, editor config, testing with AutoMocker, NuGet package source mapping, Dependabot, actions pipeline, SLNX file, and we are good to go. That is all of it. Izzy, hit me with the question. Hit me with the question. And then we may go powwow and play on some of this stuff, because we've got failing builds on the material design project, and I kind of want to smash a couple of them. So I'll let you type for a minute, and I'm going to go grab the build artifacts from this. Because I don't like having failing tests. I'll leave this guy up for a moment just in case your question pertains to this. Otherwise, I'm going to switch over. So for people unfamiliar, Material Design in XAML is a WPF theming library. Some people hate me because I am literally bringing Google's Material Design to Windows apps, and some people go, keep your Google design language out of my Windows apps. And I go, well, if it makes it pretty, it's up to the app developer. And frankly, I think the material design stuff just looks nice. I'm an Android guy too, so maybe I'm biased. Let's see. With the commands that have the can execute, do you put the check in the command too? Great question. Great question, right? So the idea being right here is, should there be an if, count less than 5, then do the thing, right? Or similar, right? So duplicate up this, or I've seen people also do the can increment count, right? You can merge it together however you want. So it depends. And here's what I typically would tell people. I personally think that you should not invoke things like the increment count method directly from elsewhere. It's kind of like invoking your command handler. JC, good morning. But some people do, right? Like they're like, well, but I've got this clear command, and after I clear, what I really want to do is all the same stuff in my increment count, right? And so like this works, but if you're going to invoke it like this, you probably do want to double up your check, right? If you're doing direct invocation. I often, and there's not a great way to enforce this. I often prefer to tell people, hey, if there is shared logic that you want to be done between two relay commands, private void do work, right? Don't double up, right? Put the count here, call do work here, right? And go through and really, Copilot, you found similar code in other repos. Really, count plus plus is used in other repos. One is shocked. And then call do work in the same place here. So it depends a little bit. I usually don't like doubling up the checks, but it is kind of necessary if you have people directly invoking these methods. So yeah, and like I said, it does kind of depend a little bit. You don't need to. So if the command is only being done from WPF via the binding going through the command, you don't need to worry about it being invoked when the can execute is returned false, right? That if that's happening, you've got some other bug elsewhere, and the solution is not to hide it in the relay command. But again, if people are doing direct invocations where they're calling into this method directly and the check is worth validating on, yeah, it's probably worth including it in both places. So like I said, I generally, potato versus potato. Yeah, exactly, Izzy. Exactly. So yeah, I usually tell people don't do a lot of extra work in here. If there's something that needs to be shared, break it out into a shared method and then just use that in both places. That's kind of my preference. But again, there's nothing stopping you from doing it. The other thing you can kind of do, and I've done this in the past as well, is if you really want something to chain from one command into another, right? You can actually do something of this nature. The thing is if you call execute directly, execute does bypass can execute. There's nothing, so if something directly hits the command, but I've often written extension methods on iCommand that basically wrap up the call to can execute followed by execute, and leverage that. That way it's like if I'm going to daisy chain, I often do it in this manner because this feels a little nicer. And usually if I'm daisy chaining like this, it's because I've got like a manual key handler or something of that nature where I've got some other thing coming into the system where I then want it to behave the same as if the user clicked the button, right? And so I'll have an extension method that says execute if able, or something of that nature, right? So this then checks can execute and then shells out to execute. So great question though. Great question. Because the MVVM toolkit in some ways actually makes this pattern easier to fall into, just because it's a little bit nicer. Okay, let's go smash some of these tests to the ground. So this was one that annoyed me because this is literally updating that Dependabot action that I showed off earlier that'll auto merge Dependabot PRs for me, and it didn't auto merge on a minor version rev because a unit test failed. Now, obviously, that action has literally nothing to do with the unit test whatsoever. So what we want to do here is figure out what the heck went wrong. So we're going to grab this guy, and we are going to go here, and we're going to go here, and we're going to go here. And we've got branches, find all the stuff. There's the one I care about. Switch branch, please. Thank you. And then... yeah, I've already got it open. Great. Okay, so if we go here, and now the fact that things have passed before means that I'm very confident going into this that if I run this test in isolation, it's probably about to pass. We will confirm that because you should always confirm that first. But the fact that I've got builds coming off of main where the thing went green, I'm pretty confident. I'm very, very confident. So... well, that guy is thinking about its life and what it did and why it doesn't like me. Let's just take a quick gander. So this is underneath my text box text. We'll go here and we'll go here. And so this is the screenshot at the point it failed. Oh. Okay, so there's the screenshot that it took at the point of failure, which is nice. The one thing I'm noticing immediately is I see the underline control here. So there was some click or similar. And then let's take a quick gander. Context menu, get font family. Expected the font family to be Times New Roman, but found... Sergo UI. So this is the default WPF font. This one terrifies me because we'll look and see how this is working, but this is somewhat host dependent because people can add and remove fonts. And I also don't see a context menu in this thing here. So that's interesting to say the least. So let's see here. Context menu inherits font family. And this guy failed on which line again? Assert that context menu get font family is equal to text box font family. Assert that context menu is equal to text box font family. So you'll note this is one of the things that is kind of cool about TUnit and how it renders it out, is it literally shows me exactly where the thing failed, which is awesome. Okay, so that gives me the text box font family name was Times New Roman. What concerns me most is this guy here. We have a context menu. We right-clicked on it. We right-clicked on it. We grabbed the context menu, but clearly we didn't get the context menu is not shown in this image. So I'm willing to bet the failure is either the context menu hasn't opened fully yet. One pass and one fail. Actually, you know what? The fact that this thing shows a failure is interesting to me as well. Let me grab this. Actually, let's just bring you over here. Full screen for me for a minute. So the one pass, one fail is kind of artificial because this is more reflective of which tests have I manually run. Because the test runner is just showing me what my executions are, and I haven't executed 1,217 tests. Mostly because the full suite takes like 12 minutes, and I don't want to wait that long. But this one here also triggered in the same way, and I'm thinking it's because I was clicking. Because I believe the code in question that does this fires when the context menu opens. So let me run this one more time. Hands up, not touching anything. Except for my mic. See, that one went through and passed. So I'm willing to bet the issue is that either we didn't get the click going all the way through, or something closed it even quicker. I tend to think we just haven't had the context menu fully open, and we might just need to wait for that. Let's see, Hyson, increase count command execute null is the same as increase count command notify can execute change? No, not quite. So when you call execute blindly like that, it will straight up invoke the execute command of the command, regardless of whether its can execute state is true or false. So if you manually call the execute method directly on an I command, it will invoke it. The notify can execute changed, what that does is that raises an event on the command that tells any binding on the UI that's watching the command, hey, you need to re-invoke my can execute method. So the notify can execute changed. When you invoke that, what you will typically see if you put a breakpoint inside your can execute method is you'll often see it then an invocation come back down to you from the binding going, well, I was told that my can execute method might return a different value this time. Let me check. Because that the binding doesn't know how often to call this. So it calls it once when it first binds because it needs to figure out what its initial state should be. And then it never invokes this again until it's given a reason to check it, right? And one of the most common reasons it's given to check again is the notify can execute changed event being raised. Because if we look at increment count command, right, we can see that there are this event here that exists on it, and this is what the binding's actually registering for, is this event. You typically don't register for this event yourself because you are often the producer of the event, not necessarily the consumer. The consumer is almost always the binding out in your XAML. So if that makes sense, let me know if there's any questions on that. Great question, though. Great question. Okay, so here I'm thinking what we want to do. So I think I actually want to change this up a little bit. Is wait for, because one of the things that happened is we switched from XUnit to TUnit, and I think TUnit just runs enough faster that it makes a mess of things that require timing. And then if I do return context menu get is open and do that. So the wait for is my own kind of built-in waiter thingy. And if you give it a Boolean returning action to do, it will wait for that thing to return true, otherwise it throws. And I think what I want to do, the only interesting part is this. I think I have to declare the context menu outside of it. Visual element. Yeah, that thing. Code matches appear in Copilot. Yes, I understand. But this is my library, Copilot. If somebody else has that in their library, they're copying me, not the other way around. Okay. So I think doing this, waiting for it to be open, and then grabbing it. And actually, I think what I want to do is get the text box font first, and actually assert on that, and then run this. Because I'm willing to bet there's potentially, and TUnit is set up, and this is one of the things that I've noticed that I think is potentially biting me, is I think the timing of when one test finishes and the next test starts, I think TUnit's just really, really fast at the transition, and the desktop Windows stuff just doesn't keep up. Okay, so I think that one will probably fix that, or at least get me closer. It'll get me into a state where I need to do it. Where's the other failure? Just looking for another failure. There's 2 in this list. Or is there 2 in this list? I assume there was 2, but because I got 2 screenshots, but I'm also capturing extra screenshots. Let's see. Only 1 failed there. So only 1 failing test. I may be blind, but I can't find the code to do the auto merge on a Dependabot PR. Oh, great question. Great question. Let me push this real quick. And then, boom. AI, write me a good commit message. Pretty please. Sounds great. Thanks. So the bits that you are looking for, JC, and this is coming from my WPF template, but if you're looking at any of my templates, you'll see something similar. And you'll also see it on a bunch of my repos too. Down here, the things that you are looking for is I have this auto merge job, and then specifically I am leveraging this GitHub action down here. So Fastify is the author of it, and it's GitHub action merge Dependabot. And there is a, if we go out and look at their repo, there is, shut up, github.com. There is a handful of things that actually need to be configured on your repository for this thing to work. So it's got options for if you just wanted to approve rather than merge and all of that stuff only approve various things of that nature. So there's lots of configuration out on here that I am just not using. But if you are coming from an old version, there are some permissions that need to be set out here, which you'll note permissions I've got set here. And then you'll note that with the way I have it set up here, I am leveraging, rather than it merging the PR, what it's doing instead is it's setting auto merge, which requires you to enable auto merge on your GitHub repository. I have a PowerShell script that uses the GitHub CLI, or if you just go to the settings, there is allow auto merge just on the main general page for turning it on, because without this setting turned on, you can't set PRs to auto merge. But once you have PR set to auto merge, the next thing that you actually need for that to work is out on your branches. You need something in the branch protection rules to indicate what the criteria are for an auto merge to succeed, right? And so typically the criteria is going to be, hey, did my test pass, right? And so if you're looking at this one here, what you end up specifying is the job name as the criteria. So in this, if you're using the template, the job in question would be, did the build job complete, which this maybe should be called build and test, build and publish, because it does several things, but this is what would end up going into that spot to get the auto merge working on PRs. So if you're trying to just extract out that little bit of the code, those are all the little bits that you need. And then obviously the dependabot YAML, because you need dependabot running to open the PRs. But usually getting that much working isn't people's problem. Yeah, no problem, JC. Let me know if it doesn't get working for you, because it should work. Okay, let's see. That gets me there. That guy gets up and running. I want to make sure, I believe it merged in, and actually I guess I can just check it here. After I pushed the release, I want to make sure the version number bumps happened. It didn't. Didn't I open a PR for that? Did it not merge? Wait a minute. Update versions. Yeah. Oh, because I'm on the dependabot branch. I'm not on latest. Okay, I need to grab. I was like, man, I could have sworn I merged the version bump. Okay. There we go. Version bump is there. There we go. Version bumps are all done. So I currently am tracking my base versions in this getversions.yaml, and then it does some wacky stuff to add in things for nightly releases and that kind of thing. Because I can't do things in an easy way. I have to do them as hard as humanly possible. Okay, I'm trying to remember what was going on this one. Let's see. I think, was this done? I think this was done because I left the feedback and I think Corvin's addressed it. See, that's fine. This is just showing it in the demo app. I think that's fine. So we came in here. Yeah, and I think this was the only thing that was remaining on this, is because right here what we have, and this is one of the few things that I was watching for, is, and we've done this a lot in our templates, and I think we're going to have to go back and fix several of them, is we do things like this where this is fine, there's a grid, and inside the grid we are toggling which set of controls are visible or not, but there's still functionally twice as many controls in here as what we need. And so I think I would rather swap out the content, because one of the performance penalties with WPF is if you have a lot of extra items in your template, those start to add up, especially if somebody does something crazy like puts them inside of a list or similar. Now, this is a tab control. It's probably never going to be in a list, but I still think it's worth potentially cleaning up. I'll leave that one sit for the moment. Let's see. Ooh, I want to go through and look at this one. This is one I would like to go and look at. Let me grab this one, because this is a cool one. This is a cool one. Add remote and checkout, please. So this is a, yeah, sure, fine. Reset my master to there. So this is porting over for people who, because I briefly looked at this. So this is material color utilities from the Material Foundation and porting this into .NET. And the idea here is being able to have almost a nice color scheme builder-ish of being able to go through and do this. There was some really interesting bits of code of disliked colors. Like, there was a reference to a book that I then had to go and look up, all on color theory and the psychology of different colors, of how certain colors are generally universally disliked, which I nearly died laughing. So like the yellowy brown color is one that was called out as kind of a universally disliked color, because it's often associated with like rotting food and that kind of thing. And then that same week, one of our designers at work made a similar comment on how yellow was ugly and she didn't like using it, and I nearly died laughing. I'm like, I know why. I've got it. I get it now. It was kind of funny. I thought that was hilarious, and I learned a ton on color theory. So 2 birds, 1 stone. So let's relaunch this because I want to take a look. There was a lot of code in here, and I wanted to check it because it's in here, and there is, as you can see, there's mass amounts of code for the test, for the utilities, and I don't remember if this was used anywhere outside of this. Because again, this is a straight port of, yeah, this one. What is it flagging here? Oh, interesting. Okay. Oh, because it's on a dislike folder and it doesn't have it here. Like, is disliked. Return true if a color is disliked. Like, that is just an awesome function. I have to agree that is fairly cool. Now, I do wonder, so there's a problem that I have been struggling with, and I don't know how to solve it, and I think this library probably makes it worse. But we have the Material Design Colors repository, and the history on this is this was built way back when the original author was working on it with the intent of, at the time, he was adding in more of the material design color themes, and he wanted to be able to release this independently with updated color themes that people could just pull in and release willy-nilly. However, with all of the changes that I've done, the coupling is kind of tight, and it's been years since we've released the colors library or the Ma apps library without a main library update, which is why all the version numbers are now in sync. And so I've been very tempted to collapse the colors library into the WPF library. The only thing that's kind of stopping me, like, it's already a it's not like somebody could use this outside of WPF anyway. And so it's like, boy, do I just flatten those things together and have it all in the box so it's one NuGet package instead of 2? It's tempting. It's really tempting. Slightly smaller download if we do that, but possibly breaking because I'm going to hose everybody's namespace references. That's less good. But yeah, this guy here, and I'm curious, I want to know, did the library creates colors according to this system. I wanted to see MRI 69, thank you for the follow, I appreciate it. I wanted to see if there was a reference in here outside of the library, because most of this is just straight new code. Yeah, I don't think it's actually in here. Why is there an X next to this? Is it because one of the tests in here failed? Look at that. Look at that. That's kind of cool. And there's things like this where there's a directory packages prop. Oh, I guess this isn't inside the folder. Okay, so this is just bringing in these with some polyfills and a math shim. That's okay. I wonder, this is labeled as a shim, but I don't know that this is actually available. I don't, when I look at shim, I'm usually picturing something that is being added in to meet multiple frameworks, right? Like a new API is added in net 9, and so we shim in an equivalent one in net 8 so that we can use it. This feels like more of just a helper, but that's a nitpick. Let's see. Does it consider certain shades of red? Had one guy who always reacted strangely to error validation messages in an app. Turns out anything too close to the color of blood made him queasy, so we had to make the red a little more orange pinkish. Oh, that's interesting. That's very interesting. The answer is maybe. And this is why I wanted to look at this, because, and I may merge this because it's all net new code. It's all net new code. It's adding the library stuff in. It's not referenced anywhere else. And it's still on us to actually bring it into the library. Because like all of this bit still would need to be implemented. Yeah, because the material design bits, like for people who haven't seen it, like the Google engineers give a very simplified version around color system and the way to think about it. Like designers, a good designer is awesome, right? I think there's a lot of mediocre designers, but a good designer with knowledge of like color theory and otherwise is amazing, right? Of being able to go through and measure all of this. Like when I implemented some of the like the auto color adjustments for making sure that there was an appropriate contrast between your foreground and your background for the text, which that's something I should add that to probably add that to my template. So for people who haven't seen it, I'll just highlight that real quick. It's this color adjust option here. So this color adjust basically tells the material design color theming that you are okay allowing it to adjust your background and foreground colors to ensure a readable contrast ratio. So it says that effectively when you turn this on, it says, I care more about accessibility than my exact colors. So let's use this. Izzy, have a good one. And yes, I hope you have a very uneventful Friday and no more curveballs thrown at you. So if you care more about accessibility than exact colors, this is a nice option to turn on, especially if you allow your users to tweak their theme colors, or you're using, say, inherit, right? Because we now allow inherit on your secondary color to pull in the Windows color. And since you may not know what your secondary color is, how do you know what the appropriate foreground color is to place on top of it? The user may have picked any number of things. So no release in 5.3.1 or later. Don't worry. There's nothing in 5.3.1 yet, so you're safe for now. Unless a bug or something, a big bug or something creeps up, I probably hold it for a little bit and just see. I try not to hold them too long, but I held the last one like months longer than I should have, because I was threatening to release 5.3.0 before the start of summer, and it's the end of summer, and I finally kicked it. So I need to trust my pipeline more. So I'm kind of tempted to just let this one come in. Let me just go over this. Colors are represented as signed 32-bit integers instead of system Windows color. While conversion is easily possible, the question is if we should only use a conversion at the board of the library or also replace int with color for internal usage and break with the original source. That is a great question. So the idea here for people who aren't familiar with it, system Windows color, right? If we go and take a quick gander at it, we can actually just jump into this, right? So if we go in here and do system Windows color, oh, this isn't a WPF library. Ha ha ha. That's why. Let's go into the colors one. Ba-bum. System Windows color. What? Where is color? Am I crazy? System Windows media color. There we go. Right? So if we look at this guy here, this guy is just a struct with kind of the values that you would expect, right? ARGB, because that is the color space that the built-in one works off of. And you do have the source RGB, which is your floats to range from 0 to 1. But functionally, if you have an int, an integer, that is 4 bytes, right? So you have the same number of bits in an integer as you do an ARGB. Hey, cutie, welcome. How did your stream go? Hopefully well. So you have the same number of bits in an integer as you do an ARGB color, because they both have 32 bits, because these can only go up to 0 to 255. So the question being proposed is, do we expose it as a color or do we make it an integer? And that is a good question. I am tempted to say use a color because that's what most things coming in as, I think. Let's see. Unit tests don't have 100% coverage and have multiple asserts per test. While this makes it align with the original source code, I'd consider it bad practice to structure unit tests like this. Yes, though, like I said earlier, I don't subscribe to the single assert. I subscribe to the single logical assert per test. So we may take a quick gander on it. Stream was fun. Games were awful. Oh, come on. I vaguely recall listening in at one point of you saying it seemed almost too easy. So you must have had one easy win at least. We are currently looking at my material design library, and specifically a PR that a wonderful gentleman made that adds a nice bit of color utility stuff. So I get to masquerade as somebody who knows color theory. And my Mountain Dew's empty, so hang on. Reloading. I caught the one game that wasn't a disaster. Oh, sure. That's why you got to play something other than support so that you can actually complain about your back hurting from carrying the team. Okay. Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of stuff in here, and like the color tool that I have built in, right? Like there's the built-in material design. Whoa, hey. Wow, I did not know. Okay. Bad Windows, knock it off. So there's like the built-in material design palette colors, which is all the ones that the material design 2 spec does. But we also have like this custom colory thingy-mabobber where you can do all kinds of fun things and, you know, dial in exactly where you want it to be. Because this is an HLS color picker that's, I don't remember. I cleaned up some bugs with it, but I don't think I actually wrote it. I think one of the other contributors actually built it. And I do find it interesting here. It's got color adjust turned on. Oh, there it is. Oh, so with color adjust turned on, right, you'll see the actual color is this darker blue, but with color adjust on, it's adjusting it to keep the foreground readable. So no matter how dark you go, it's not going to let you go too dark because otherwise your dark text doesn't become visible. So it is an interesting one. I do wonder, it might be interesting to add a feature in where we invert the color adjust. So rather than adjusting the theme color, you can specify color adjust on like a text block and have it adjust the foreground instead. That might be a nice feature. That could be an interesting feature. That way it can go through and tweak it. The hard part about doing it at a individual element level is you have to be able to know what the background is, and that's not always trivial because you either have to like hit tests and grab pixels off the background, and you have to assume solid color, and there's a bunch of assumptions to make. But I do wonder if maybe there was an attached property that did it. Let's see. With the color tool, there doesn't seem to be a this is the result and this is how you use it, or I am missing it. You are correct. The only thing that's actually in here is this color hex value. The how you use it comes from somewhat knowing that you can use this custom color theme, like this guy here. And the custom color theme allows you to specify the RGB values that you want for your primary and secondary. So you are correct that is not called out very well. That's one thing that I've, and maybe I'll ask you, JC, what you think about this. There are a couple controls that we've started doing differently. Like this control here you basically get to see all of your options on the right, and then you can start playing around with them to see, you know, what do I like better, right? What makes more sense to me of doing this versus some of the ones like this, where it's kind of just a gallery layout of all the things, and you just scroll until you see something you like and you go, ooh, that's pretty. What does that look like, right? So I like, there's benefits to both ways of doing it. And a lot of other libraries seem to favor going more this approach but I'm kind of wondering if maybe we have like a single page where you pick a control and then you get your properties list on the right of what that control can do. That way, for people who want that, you can have this. And then for everyone else, there's kind of a gallery one. Yeah, I like the gallery because I'm bad at designing and don't know what looks good. Yeah, and I honestly kind of like the gallery too, because like, especially with like the buttons, I usually come in here and go, I like that one. And like, that's the whole point of these. Like, I know it's kind of hard to see on a dark screen, but that's the whole point of these little arrows here. This is a library that I wrote called Show Me the XAML. That literally just does this so that you can see what is the source XAML for doing this. And I laughed at one point because the Uno team actually forked it, and they have something similar in their demo app because they apparently liked it so much. So I thought that was hilarious. I was like, yay! Somebody found it useful. Single item gallery on the left with the chosen control in the middle and props on the right. Yeah, it could be something like that. And I do wonder, because it feels like I almost want some way of doing that kind of thing. The hard part is not all the things are props, right? Like, some of them are different styles, but even on like that pop-up control, right? Like, it does give you a style drop down, so we could get away with it, right? Depending on which of the styles you wanted to do. Because it is hard, because you wouldn't want a gallery view showing you every possible elevation value. That just yuck. Like, if I want to see what a 24 looks like, and on a dark theme, it's really hard to see the difference. So let's go light theme. All right. So if I go here and do something like DP elevation 0. Oh, interesting. I wonder if the elevation isn't respected by this style. Or if the elevation is only used on the pop-up. Let's see. Is the elevation only used on the... Oh, the elevation's only used on the content, not on the pop-up or the button itself. That's interesting. That feels like something I wonder if that's just an artifact of us not exposing an extra elevation property or otherwise. Because I kind of expected when I did this because you can see the shadow here in the elevation, and that to me looks like, I don't know, 6, 8 maybe. And so when I set it to 24, I expect a vastly different thing, but when it's applying to the content and only applying in a certain area, I think the floating action pop-up box is probably just disregarding this. So yeah, there's some work to be done around making this demo app a little more helpful to people. Even your comment too, JC, about, hey, on the color tool, it doesn't really show me how to use it. I kind of want to change out the color tool page for something that's more like a theme builder, because I think that's what people really want to use it for. Is they want to build something that that shows them the XAML that they can paste into their app.xaml like this and go, and you're good, right? They want something that generates into this and either gives them a bundled theme or a custom color theme and lets them decide on all the stuff. And I think, yes, theme builder, please. And the other thing that's technically possible and not really exposed here that I think would be better with a theme builder is we switched back on the 5.0 release, I think. And we actually have we started breaking out all of the brushes. So I have is it the palette.json? No. theme colors. I have this JSON file that is used as the source of some code gen that documents out all of the brushes. And so if you want to go in and say, I don't want to just set my primary and secondary, I want to tweak the a very specific, the button ripple brush, you can go through and tweak just that one brush and have it work, right? The problem is, to do that requires you to A, know about the brush, and B, go through and tweak it. And so I'm kind of thinking that on like a theme builder, I would gen part of the theme builder to build out one of these themes. Yeah, you could have this like the pop-up thing for buttons, and then some examples on the left to scroll through when clicking on examples. Change the properties to the example. Best of both worlds, I guess. Yeah, and I think that's kind of the picture I had in my head when JC was saying, like, single item gallery on the left, chosen control in the middle, and props on the right. That's kind of the picture that I drew in there. Let's see, 530, add a numeric up-down in an empty project gives binding errors. Something related to automation properties.name. Ooh. Okay. I assume is that default style for it? Or did you specify a style on that one, Hessen? Or Hessine? Let's see here. Elemento default style. Okay. Okay, so where is the automation properties name? So there is a binding path on the hint assist, but you said on an empty project. Is the issue here? Oh. That's not great. That's not great. So I think the problem that's probably coming in here with the binding error is I'm willing to bet hint assist.hint is probably unset, leaving you to null or dependency property unset value. And automation properties.name wants a string. I don't believe it supports anything else. Yeah, so it's a type of string. So we've got a problem here in that we are binding this guy through. And this is... This is an awkward one. Because on one hand, we really want to try to make the automation stuff work nicely for people who do UI tests. But this is one of those cases where it's really hard to get right. So the reason hint assist hint. Wow, okay, let's try this again. Okay. Mountain Dew, good. The reason hint assist hint is problematic or set to an object is because it allows you to put arbitrary content in there. You could slap in an image if you wanted as part of your hint. I don't think that's a great idea, but for example, we also have like the pack icon class for doing icons, and it would not be unreasonable for somebody to say, oh, well, as part of my little hint, I want to have an icon and some text. Great, fine, have at it. Slap a little grid or stack panel in there and you're off to the races. I am tempted to just strip this out completely. I vaguely recall a lot of discussion on this, though. Let me go back and look at the history. Numeric up, down, not there, that. Yeah, because I remember there was a lot of discussion on this particular one. And I'm wondering if we have the same problem in other cases. The other thing that we could do, because we added this on multiple controls. The other thing we could do, and I think what's probably biting us, is we could go through. Let me see if I can replicate this real quick on my sample project. Let's see. Because I can probably replicate that pretty easy by just changing this to a 530. And then close all you, close all you, close all you. And then we'll go here, we'll go here, and we'll do, oh, I don't have the namespace for material design yet. I should add that into my template. See, put it there. And then we will do, material, SIGN, markup down. Wow. No, I want, no, Copilot, stop. Okay, you're not being helpful anymore. You're not being helpful. There you go. There you go. Nice region. Yeah, I know. Sometimes Copilot's helpful. Other times I insult it using colorful Latin and Old English. Let's see. What? Value of collection, UI element collection is string to UI. What did I do wrong? Or more accurately, Copilot, what did you do wrong? Oh, you didn't properly terminate the thingy. That no worky. Write valid XML, Copilot. Okay. So we go there, and there, in fact, is the binding error. Value no cannot be assigned to property, blah, 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 blah. And you are correct. Automation properties name. And I'm willing to bet a workaround for this would be hint assist, hint empty string. I bet you that cuts one of the binding errors out. Look at that. Fixes it. So I think the solution here, and we'll just, so I think what I want to do for this is something like setter property, let's see here, and I want to go with WPF hint assist, hint value gets empty string. Because doing this allows it to have a value. Oh, I guess here I don't want the parens on it, do I? I want this. And then that should compile. Because that should get it set to a default one. The problem I have is if you change it... If you change it to an object, it's still going to fail. It's still going to fail. I'm wondering if it's better to value converter it instead. Okay, let's test that. So, okay, let's go back to my sample app. Because, for example, right, if rather than just doing empty string, if we do something more like this, right, let's see, material design. You'd think I'd learn after all these years how to actually type it. Hint assist, hint, and then, for example, if I do a stack panel, right, and I do text block, text, set count, right? So that is very much not a string. Right, I think I probably still end up with a binding error here too. No, I don't. It's only unhappy when it's unset. How very, very interesting. Why is it okay with that? Snoop, I need you. Come here. why is it okay with that? Because that's not a string. Ignore those binding errors. Those are triggered by Snoop. But what I want to know is the numeric up down automation property.name. What are you? You are the literal string system Windows controls stack panel. See, and this is why I'm wondering if this is what we really want. Check the hint being set. Yeah, and that's why I'm thinking what I almost want to do is value converter it. I think I want to value converter it. So let's okay, we're going to test this theory. So if I go, because this is the guy here, right? I want this. Come here, you big ugly. I want this, and I want this binding. I'm going to recreate the binding here. All right, so this is functionally what I want, and this needs to be material design. Okay. But I think what I want to build here is I want a, oh, I guess I can use the new button up here. Is it this? Yeah, add new item, show compact view. String value converter. Thank you. I value converter, boom, boom, boom. And then public, and then control RG, format all the things, file scope the namespace, implement the interface. Yeah, I don't trust Copilot to do it. So, and then I think what I want to do is something like if value is string, return value, else return, I think I actually want dependency property unset value. So this is a magical value that if it comes through a binding, it will set the property back to whatever its default is. So for example, if we look at automation property.name, oh, it doesn't show me here. Because when you declare your static dependency property, you declare what the default is for the value. And so sending unset value effectively sends it back to the default. For a lot of things, for like strings, it's typically null. For like doubles for size and whatnot, it's typically double.nan, not a number. But I think what I want to do here then is, let's go up here, window resources, local, string value converter. Stop trying to put regions in my XAML, you stupid idiot AI. Sorry, was that my out loud voice? Let's see, converter, static resource. Can you figure it out from this? Hey. Too slow, Copilot, too slow. Okay, so now if I launch, I expect that I'm hitting this, and I should probably set a breakpoint just to confirm, but I'm kind of wondering if I put a converter equivalent of this in the library. So see, we're fine there. And if I look at its automation property, I'm hoping it's, you know, null or unset or similar. So numeric up down, automation properties.name. Great, binding error, get error message. That's not helpful. Wow, we've got a lot. Prevent local brushes to keep the designer sign maintainable. Interesting. So we've got a couple of those that we may want to clean up. And then we may want to start freezing some things because apparently we got a bunch of unfrozen brushes. But some of these might actually be Snoop itself because I'm looking at like light red -75. That isn't me. But what is the binding error in question here? All right, so where is the Null cannot be assigned. Automations property dot name. Interesting. Why does it think that it's null? So hypothetically, if we dial back this down to empty string, let's do this. Because I do want to make sure if brushes are frozen, can they even paint? Yes. So a frozen brush. So WPF was written back at the same time that was it .NET 3 or .NET 3.5 was being built. I don't remember. It was in that time frame, 2005. And so immutability wasn't really a thing that they had to work with. Their only way of doing immutable was kind of with like structs or otherwise. Like there was no built-in first-party support. If you wanted it, you had to build it. And the thing with brushes and similar is you want a brush to be mutable while you're configuring it. Like a gradient brush, you want to be able to assign to all of its properties to say, oh, make the gradient go from here to here. And trying to make it all set up front, because bear in mind, they didn't have things like init properties or otherwise to work with. So it was like, that API kind of sucks. So they went through and said, well, immutability gives us a lot of performance. So we want things to become immutable. And so for things like brushes, if they are frozen, it just means that their properties can't be changed. And so they get the benefits of immutability because then, you know, caching similar can be leveraged and abused. So that's the warning there is there effectively something that can be frozen? And if you typically with brushes, once you create them, you probably want to freeze them because you often aren't mutating them after the fact. And if you're using, sometimes people leave them unfrozen for animations, which is fine. But you can actually animate between brushes, which is usually slightly better, but context dependent. Okay. So I want to look at this now. I want to make sure you don't show you immediately flagged a handful of those. The reason I'm not as concerned with the binding errors is Snoop, when it fires up, it iterates through every object and well, I should say every object. When you navigate in here, it's ripping through all of the properties on these things. And so sometimes calling a properties getter triggers more binding errors because it doesn't know what it should or shouldn't do. It just grabs all the things. Okay, so this is no longer an error if we just go empty string for automation property. So maybe what we need is a converter for automation property name. I think that's probably better. Is something simple like this, because that's the case where it's an object. But if I go through and I do, right, so we're going to comment this for a moment. But if I do, let's see, hint assist, hint set count, right? In this case, I would expect it's interesting because the hint isn't even shown in this case. It's kind of weird that it's on this one. It's not even shown. Is it used? Hang on. Is there actually a hint? It is. This guy here, it's being set on the text box, but for the hint to show up, the text box has to have a style that would leverage it. Nested text box style. Material design text box, and I think text box base, I think we can get into here, and somewhere in here, I believe the hint actually makes its way out. Because I'm just wondering is if part of the issue is that so there is a smart hint in there. Because I see the hint distance, opacity, converter, offset, margin, There's the hint itself, and there's the hint assist hint. So it gets in there. What's a snoop? Oh, great question. This little thing. This is one of my favorite things. And apparently when I reorganized my stuff, my browser closed. So that's exciting. GitHub Snoop. So you got to put the word GitHub in front of your query. Otherwise you end up with Snoopy or Snoop Dogg, and neither one of those will help you with your WPF. Well, at least I've gotten no help from either of those with my WPF. So this is a little inspector utility. Bastian Smith is a popular WPF developer. He's got several really cool WPF libraries, so feel free to poke around on his other stuff. But it's a little inspector that lets you poke through your WPF apps to look at all of the elements. It's very similar to like what web developers are used to with their dev tools, where they can kind of poke through the DOM and see all the elements and the CSS and the styling. Snoop is effectively the same type of thing. It's dev tools, but for WPF. Visual Studio does have their built-in like live visual tree. It's just not nearly as powerful. Yeah, like Snoopy the dog. Yes, exactly. Very similar. Or Joe Cool for those people who know their Peanuts lore. Is that a thing? Feels like it's a thing. So I think that's probably the solution here is we probably want an automation a converter that leverages this, because I don't know if I like this as setting this here as much as falling back on it. Is this one inheritable? It does inherit. Oh, that's even more interesting. So when you set the property metadata inherits, what this means is you don't have to set it on the element where you want it. You can set it on any parent and it'll propagate down. Or another way to say it, a child inherits this value from its parent. And so you can set it on any parent and it'll propagate in, which is a little weird. It's a little weird, but it's likely there so that we don't have to remember to forward it in all cases. Because if you don't have inherit turned on, you then have to make sure to template bind and forward it to the right elements in all cases, and that's kind of obnoxious. Though I think we are template binding, so we may be able to drop the inherit. And as soon as we do, I'm going to find somebody who was leveraging it at a top level element in their app and it didn't propagate. But I think a converter is the right thing here. Dependent bot PR completed but hasn't merged. Warning, PR contains non-dependent bot commit skipping. Oh! Thank you, JC. I appreciate it. Going back. Yes, because I pushed to it, the action in question won't treat it as a pure dependent bot PR because there's humans in there, so human has to go click the button then, which is fine. That's kind of what I expect. Okay, on this colors utility, I'm seriously tempted to just merge this because it's not hurting anything. The only thing I want to check though is I think there was a failing test. Let me compile this and check because it's not going to break anything. And let me go and log real quick an issue for bug report, binding errors on automation property name. In 530 release, create a new numeric up down control with the default style. Let's see, Observed binding error on the automation name property. Wow, I cannot type tonight. It's a good thing I'm not paid for my typing ability, because I'd be failing. Let's see. Expected no binding errors. I think the correct solution here is to create a value converter that can be applied to the binding. If the value is a string, return it. Otherwise, simply return empty string. And then we are going to put this in the 531 milestone. Issue type bug. Yeah, create that.
Yeah. Thank goodness for spell check, because I will never be able to spell necessarily correctly.
Yes.
Amen.
Then Copilot fix my issue. What version did you find this in? Oh, 5.3.0. Create. And you're not wrong, JC. You are not wrong. If only find all of the controls that use the or that bind the automation properties.name to hint assist.hint and apply the value converter to those bindings. The real disadvantage to the Copilot coding agent on this is it runs underneath a Linux host, which means it is immediately hamstrung on any projects, properties, or property. Oh, that's a good point.
I may have prompted it wrong.
Yeah, we'll see what it does. The
Properties.
because it runs under a Linux host, it's hamstrung because it actually can't compile nor run the tests. And so if you are using the coding agent, you will see much better success if your project can be compiled and run by the coding agent, because it now is limited in which things it has access to because it can't compile and run, which is admittedly a pretty big hamstring.
I can't wait for all the new regions.
Man, just don't say that. It might hear you. And that's the problem, is it might actually do that. But we'll let that thing go, and then we'll see where that lands. Okay, so this guy here, I just wanted to check its color utilities tests, because I think the pipeline showed one of the color utilities tests failing. Let me just check and see. Which test failed? Yeah, and I think the test didn't fail. I have warnings as errors turned on. Contrast constraint tests. Oh, so the issue is I have warnings as errors turned on, and this now the warning, yeah, so it's fine here, but if I look, let's see, if I rebuild, I should see the warnings, and then we can chase them down. Yeah, there they are. Yeah, so those are there.
Yeah, and yet GitHub is now owned by Microsoft.
Yes, believe me, we've been asking for Windows functionality for a while. It's just like the Linux runners are so much faster. They put a lot of effort into those because most projects can be cross-compiled, and you technically can turn on Windows targeting for compilation from a Linux host. That is a thing you can turn on. However, I have not figured out how to get the appropriate SDK installed on the Linux host so that it then doesn't just blow up and barf saying I can't find the SDK. So you can turn it on and you can get it to compile and get it going, but you can't then actually do anything useful with it, which is really exciting. Okay, so let's see. What is the use delta constraint instead? So delta constraint. Is that all it takes? Delta constraint. Let's see here. Why are these things obsolete? Nearer, farther. So it's just those two. I am tempted. To not, because this is actually creating a delta constraint. So I think what I'm tempted to do here, oh, nope, don't help me. I think what I want to do here is actually just suppress the warning in source. Oh dear heavens, where did you just put those pragmas? No, that's not where I want you. Like, I get why you went up there, but no. Bad Visual Studio. I want to suppress the warnings as tightly as I can, and wrapping all the lines is not the answer. So we'll do that. And so that will get that warning out of the way. Assert that true is true. Keep async signature satisfied. This seems like something I don't want to do. Not the three below those. No, it's not the entire enum that is banned. It's just the farther and nearer ones that appear to be marked as obsolete. And again, without looking into why, but it's specifically, it says to be using a delta constraint, which wraps the enum. But in this case, like, this is building the delta constraint. So it feels like the one use case where it's probably acceptable to put it in. I'm not a huge fan of this. For each constraint, test against. What does test against do? Oh, it goes and has various ones here. Okay, because this is the other case where I think I suppress. Because once again, it's building up the very thing that it wants to leverage. It's like it's trying to build the delta constraint that's telling you to use. So it's probably suppressing it is the right thing here. Assert that should not be used with constant value. I agree. Is there a reason I can't do this? Is it because I have a Lang version? There's no target type. Oh, because okay, because it's var on the left. Okay, and I'm just gonna clean this up while I'm in here. I know I really shouldn't do this because I get, it's like, ooh, I can clean this up, and ooh, I can change this, and I should learn how to stop. Don't like it, but I'm gonna ignore it for the moment. Let's check for more warnings. Let's check for more warnings, because I think that's probably all that's needed. And then we'll see if the author left the checkbox checked for me to be able to push back. Collection initialization can be simplified. Yes, it can be. Okay, rebuild all successful. Error list, 2 warnings. Colors declared but never used. That was me. That doesn't count. Let's see, error list, assert that should not be used with constant value. Yeah, so the issue being if I drop this, there's no other async call, so I think it prompts with a different warning, I believe, saying, hey, you've made a method async, but it's not async. But I wonder if that's actually... I don't know that it will inside of a T-unit project. What are you yelling about? Found similar code. View code matches. Go ahead, Copilot. What are you so excited about? It's old enough you've forgotten? Great. Great. You've forgotten, which means it can't be that important. Yeah. Doesn't assert fail. Rebuild all successful. 0 warnings. Great. Let's see. So let's go here. We'll just double check the work. We're going to get rid of this because that's irrelevant to this branch. This is cleaning up. Oh, I have to stage it first because I'm not an idiot. And then if I push cancel, I don't want to be pointed there. I want to be pointed at, so because I had it reset my local master branch is tracking my origin master, and I don't want to be there. I want to be pointed here as my upstream. I want to push to that one instead. Look at that. I have push permissions. Yay! So, as a maintainer, I very much enjoy when people allow me to push back to their forks. But just be aware, if you open a PR against someone's fork, the default behavior on GitHub is to have a checkbox to allow people with commit access to the thing that you're PRing into to be able to push back into yours. So it's very convenient, but just be aware that you are allowing outside people access into that branch on your repository when you do that. So you're implicitly giving them permission.
Let's see, I would have had to change those if null throws
to string throws. Yeah. There's probably several things in here that are worth cleaning up. I think the original author was trying to keep the code in sync with the source library. And so I will probably go through and because the usage of this needs to be implemented as well. And I'm somewhat tempted to collapse it into really, because he's actually got it set up to build in with the same stuff as what the colors WPF does. So I'm really tempted to add that in. Wait, what is he doing? Regular expressions, colors, version, drop CID. Well, that's exactly what I did here. Oh, that's,
boy, past Kevin was brilliant.
it's dropping out the last bit of the version number and replacing the CI number with just empty strings so that when you pass in a version that has a NuGet valid version string, it becomes a valid version string to be used in an assembly version because assembly versions don't support non-numerics. Got it. Got it. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back here once again. I think we're going to go here, and then we're just going to reply back to the author. We will approve the workflow to run because there's nothing malicious in there as far as I can tell. Okay, so let me add a reply to this. Quote reply. 1. I think at the border of the library, using color over int will make it much more usable. That's probably a fair thing. 2, I am fine with the test having multiple asserts. Usually the guidance I use is having test assert on one logical thing, even if that means multiple assert statements. And I am happy address exceptions in certain cases. Okay, we'll do that, and then let's see, 3. How it is in the original code. If this code should be removed or the warning suppressed, currently it breaks the build. I pushed a commit to suppress the warning in line for now. I think I am going to set this to merge. Since it is not currently being consumed or published, I think it will then allow for easier collaboration on it moving forward. I think getting let's see, I think getting the color bit will be helpful, and samples in the demo app. There we go. I don't know why I cannot type in the. I always type int he. Like there is no, like, I blame my programmer fingers do not like typing in the. It's like, no, it must be int. If you type in, the only logical conclusion is that you're typing the word int. There is no other option. Okay, so what failed now? That failed very quickly. Failed after 2 minutes. Let's see. Consider using the weight. Oh, is this the same test that I dropped the thing out of? Oh my word. Why didn't I see the warning locally? Yeah, it's the same bloody thing. Await task. Complete a task. What the heck? How about we not indent like an idiot? Thanks. So we'll do, so I think await task, complete a task is, it's a worthless statement, but it'll fix the bit that's there. Because I believe TUnit requires all tests to be async, if I remember right. Simply because all of its assertions require async. TUnit tests don't have to be async. Oh, really? Oh, really? Hold up then. You're gonna make me... I saw nothing, I saw nothing, I saw nothing. I have push permissions. Come on, come on, come on. Write me a commit message and do it quickly. Yeah, that'll work. Thanks. And then force push. I saw nothing. There was no mistakes. Pudding.
Thank you, JC. I abuse AutoHotkey to correct these small typos. Yes.
I should consider that. I've typically never used it to correct like on the fly typing things, but that's actually probably a very reasonable thing to do. Ironically, I've started using voice to text in a lot of cases for like doing replies. I don't know. It's kind of a weird thing because when you're doing voice to text to type, like at first it's weird because pauses actually have a practical effect versus when you're talking to somebody, a pause doesn't, or typically doesn't. I mean, I suppose you put a pause at the wrong point in a sentence and you can change the meaning. That's different. But it is something that I think it allows me to go a little quicker. So specifically, even when like interacting with Copilot or anything else that has a voice input. Yep, approve run. We're going to let that guy go. And I am going to put this in the milestone and I am going to slap a release notes label on it. And it's only going in 5.3.1 because it's merging. I'm not committing to actually shipping a library with this in 5.3.1, just FYI. So if anybody's getting too excited, I like where this is going. I think this is probably a good basis for a theme editor, or at least a good start to one. But we'll see. We will see. I make no promises. Okay, this one here, I think, because we went round and round on this, and I think Corvin's... Yeah, because this is the one where we had all kinds of craziness. Yeah. Okay, so what was the failure on the pipeline on this one? Was it another freaking test? More importantly, discussion on how to get the focused element. Let's see here. We can resolve that one. And we did that. I implement changes from my manual testing. It works fine. However, the UI test I added is failing. Figured out why it fails. Okay, so that's good that it's at least... Okay, so let's... Oh man, it's also midnight. It's also midnight. Do we attack this right now? Do we attack this right now? Or is sleep important? Boy, I'm torn. I am torn. I'm tempted to attack this right now. Let's just briefly look at the PR. Briefly. Let's see. Checkout. Reload. Let me grab the UI tests and let's see. What was the test name that let's see. If we go summary, we can just scroll down and get the name. I'd love to get rid of these skip tests out of my... I should look at adding a filter to drop all of these manual ones so that they aren't even marked as skipped, because they show up in my output and I kind of want to drop them from the report somehow, either by not running them altogether so they aren't in the report. Yeah, this guy. Okay, so let's take a look here. And then we're just going to blind run this sucker, and hands are up. I'm not touching. No touchy. Only normal people need sleep. I know, JC, I know. And no one has accused me of being normal yet, so that's probably a good thing. I do wonder, because I see that task delay sitting there. That gives me a bit of pause. But I like the abuse of remote execute. That's wonderful.
He says, and sleeping for 8 hours. Yeah.
Okay, are we going? Did we run? I can't tell.
Did it do a thing?
Oh, there we go. Okay, it's going and doing things. Very clever use of doing this. Okay. Well, that was helpful. Okay, do we see the same failures that Corbin showed in his screenshot? Certainly looks like it. Certainly looks like it. Okay, so let's take a brief gander. That does, I think, align with the screenshot he posted. I'll leave that tab open so that just Copilot, or GitHub, you're going slow. Go faster. Okay, so bottom two, minimize, maximize, null, minimize, normal, null. I think that's the exact ones we saw. Minimize, maximize, null. Okay, so let's take a look at here. Minimize, maximize, null. So I'm just going to do this and knock those out of my way for a minute. Okay, so first window state, second window state, style name is unset functionally. Okay, and then where is the failure in this? Assert that text box text is true. So TB2 is focus true. Let's see, TB2, because it goes down, get is focus true. That kind of makes sense. I wonder if this is a simple wait for. Because I think we can get away with this. And he does have a recorder set up on it, which is nice. So the question will be, why is this thing not claiming the text box has keyboard focus? 2. Shockingly, because it doesn't have focus. Oh. So it actually doesn't get focus. So if we go here, right, let's run let's debug this test. So what should happen is I should look and see if I'm attaching to the remote process, right? So if I'm not attached to the remote process, 2 did not get focus back. So the issue is we are not setting focus all the way back in. So the test is failing appropriately. So this wait is not going to do anything. See, this is in the dialog host. Because this is, and the other thing I wanted to double check is the registration and unregistration of the WinProc handlers. Let's see, this is going to be down around 420, 430 somewhere. 430. Okay, so there's the WinProc handler. And I am willing to bet when we come in here, we are not getting restore. I bet you we're getting maximized or similar. Yeah, maximizes the window. I bet you that's the problem. So, let's do this. Const int sc sc maximize equals. Okay, Copilot, if you actually got that right. Sewer F30. Okay, all hail Copilot. Is or let's see, maximize. Restore slash, because I don't know that there is an easy way to go from minimized to maximized in a just with Windows Explorer. I don't know how I do that. Can I? I don't think there's a way I can just right click and maximize the window. Now, the test, though, adequately demonstrates that there is definitely a programmatic approach to doing this. And I think this will fix it. I think it's just the fact that we were watching for a WinProc message of restore. And restore, I believe, just brings it back to the normal Windows state. And we probably never see that message. It probably just sends a blind maximized. Ooh, interesting. Still fails. Still fails. Let's grab it here. I think. But I need to be debugging the remote process to have that breakpoint hit. Which means I also need to drop this breakpoint, because now when I debug this test, I'm actually going to be debugging both the test project and the remote window as well. Which is convenient because now I can grab a hold of that dialog host call in the remote window. But I want to see if I actually hit that. Interesting. I'm going to change this to like 10 seconds. Let's try this again, because we never saw that WinProc message come through. And I kind of expected it. Huh. It's interesting that now it's interesting that this is what's coming through. So if I take this off, let's see here. Because I think it's probably working in the happy case. Oh, and my neck is killing me. There. I wonder why having the debugger attached is messing with this. Yeah, so it's very interesting that is going through there. I believe there's probably another param that we need to be watching in here, but I think I will need to look at this when I have more energy and consciousness. But I suspect there is probably, and we may end up doing what we did before,
where we just log out all of the WinProc messages that are going through. Because I think that might be the solution, to be able to actually see everything that is
going through. Because when you go to maximize this window, one of these, I'm surprised it's not the maximize system command that's being sent through. Because we grab the restore. maybe it's size, but I'd be a little hesitant to act on size or similar if we don't have to, because we will see that one quite a bit. I do feel like it should have been maximized. But regardless, I think I'm going to have to chase this when I am conscious enough to actually do so. I will briefly check and see. Copilot has done a thing. Copilot claims to have done the thing. Let's see. Object to string converter. Not bad. It knew how to do it. I'm mildly impressed that Copilot figured out that the way we are doing value converters here with nullable reference types is declaring these two as nullable. So I'm mildly impressed that it mirrored that pattern. So points awarded.
Its implementation basically looks like what I did. I think I would want to put this inside of
the internals namespace, and not call it object to string converter. But it certainly looks like it did exactly what I wanted. It certainly looks like it did exactly what I wanted. I need to also double check. I think we saw an issue with doing... I'm trying to remember. I'm not 100% confident we want to do it like this, and we may want to do resource references inside the style. I'll need to double check. But regardless, this is going to be assigned to me. I'm going to pop this into ready for review. I'm going to allow the pipeline to run. And then I'm going to put this in the 531 milestone. And this guy should already be in there. And Copilot actually did a thing. And I want to double check this against that original commit as well, just to make sure we haven't missed anything. But I think this gets it mostly in there. Wait, fixes? Why did you link two issues in here? This has nothing to... You idiot. Okay, I was like, this does not fix that. Sure, Copilot, go ahead and set things up. I will allow you to do that. Have at it. I'll probably clean some stuff up later, but it's worth having something better in there. It's worth having something better in there. That way it actually does what I want. So, with any luck, some of this Copilot stuff might go through. Maybe I'll turn it loose on the system message commands and see what it says. Because it does have a memorization of the Windows APIs that's much deeper than my own, which isn't horrible. So with that, I want to tell everybody thank you for coming and hanging out. Hopefully that was interesting and at least answers the question from before of, what's in my template? Why is everything in there? Where are the various pieces? Yeah, no problem, JC. Thank you for coming over. Porting PR passed on remote. Excellent, excellent, excellent. I will probably get stuff merged in there very shortly. So we will be having preview builds dropping for 5.3.1, and I don't know if the binding error is worth a hurry up and kick the 5.3.1, but it also is going to make me not want to go very long with it. So only because there is kind of a workaround. If you just set the hint to empty string or similar, the binding error goes away. So that is kind of a known workaround at the moment, but it is definitely a bug and something to call out. So, but with that, I will tell everybody happy coding. See everyone next time.